Chapter 1587. But since they were already here, Zhang Feng could not say anything. He just waited in place with a smile. It was just that Li Yuan was a little unhappy. This thing was originally an important place. You, a military general coming here, wasn't it just adding to the rumors? Moreover, it was made by Zhang Feng. Everyone knew how powerful this thing was. Now that he made such a move, wouldn't it be a big problem? Now that they were here, wouldn't they have to ask Feng Zi for this kind of weapon? Once this kind of weapon was circulated, if those hidden spies in the army revealed the matter, then it would be a big joke. Li Yuan saw the arrival of the two and snorted coldly with a fake smile. At this time, aren't you busy with the business? Why did you come here? Yu Qigong and Qing Yaojin smiled and said, "Greetings, old master. It hasn't been peaceful recently, so the two of us came to this market today and wandered around. Occasionally, we saw your servant running out carrying a big thing, so we chased after him and asked. We heard that Feng Zi made something good, so we couldn't help but come to take a look." Zhang Feng curled his lips. "Let's say first, if you want to take a look, then take it, but don't take it away." Hearing this, the smiles on Yu Qigong and Qing Yaojin's faces froze. Li Yuan looked at the three with a smile and did not speak. He beckoned to Wei Zheng and Fang Xianling and said, "Wait, watch it for me. The thing here, don't let these two big mouths take it away." The two of them looked at each other strangely, then nodded and agreed. On the other side, Yu Qigong and Qing Yaojin also dismounted at this time and whispered with Zhang Feng for a while, making Zhang Feng startled. Seeing this, Li Yuan was extremely unhappy. "Feng Zi, it's getting late, let's go in and take a look?" Hearing this, Zhang Feng suddenly said, Go, since we've come today, we have to go in and take a good look." But Zhang Feng grabbed Yu Qigong and said, "Old Yu, you said that the girl in Yanlai restaurant is really my cousin?" Yu Qigong's eyes looked around and said, "How can this be fake? Yesterday, when the servants of my family went out to buy some things, they happened to pass by Yanlai Lu and found out that a lady comparable to Jingshu had come. However, she had been tricked into coming here, saying that she was here to find a way out for her cousin. Moreover, this lady was also surnamed Zhang and came from Phoenix Mountain Range. Thus, my servants went forward to inquire and found out that this lady was actually looking for you. At that time, the procuress was so frightened that she fainted. After that, the servant gave some instructions to the old madam, and then, she was sent back to your courtyard." Hearing this, Zhang Feng felt a headache coming on. This Zhang family. He merely made it up for the sake of his identity. But don't you think it's infuriating? There really was such a King Zhang family, and there really was such a Zhang Feng. Although this matter had passed for a long time, it was just a matter of confirming his identity. But what Zhang Feng feared the most was that in the future, there would come a person who looked exactly like him called Zhang Feng, exposing his lie. Then the fun would really be huge. The most important thing was that this Zhang Feng did not seem to have heard the news of his death. If this person was going to die, then it was still fine. But if he did not die, then the fun would really be huge. Moreover, he had not done anything yet, and a cousin popped out of nowhere. This, God, are you King messing with me? Although Zhang Feng was long prepared, but hearing Yu Qigong say so at this time, although he did not know whether it was true or false, this could already be said to have rung an alarm bell for Zhang Feng. This matter had to be dealt with. But at this time, old Yu chose to say this at this time. This old man obviously did not have good intentions. Moreover, this was such a big matter, but there was no news from his family. What could he say? This could only be said to be blocked by the cunning old man, old Yu. Damn it, this time I'm going to be screwed over. Zhang Feng was somewhat pained and depressed. But at this time he could only force a smile and look at everyone with a frightening smile. Seeing this, everyone curled their lips. Dean. At this time, Alkinen came out of the cave in a hurry. His body was still filled with smoke, and his face looked like he had been fished out of a coal mine. No matter how one looked at it, it was uncomfortable. When Alkinen came, Zhang Feng put aside the distracting thoughts in his mind and asked, "What happened?" Alkinen said embarrassedly, "There was a problem just now, and the chest almost exploded. It's good that you're here. Now let's go and have a look." Exploded? What was that? The few people listened to the mysterious conversation and could not help but criticize in their hearts. However, when Zhang Feng heard this, his expression also became tense and said, "Lead the way." Then, Zhang Feng said, "Today's matter, you can see it, but don't spread it out. It's best if you want to smoke, smoke it out for me outside. If you see a spark inside, we'll all go to heaven today." The few people could not remain calm in an instant. Wei Zheng and Fang Xianling did not say anything and directly supported Li Yuan, preparing to leave. But the more mysterious this was, the more Li Yuan would not miss it. Pushing away the two people's hands, Li Yuan was unusually excited and urged, "Then, what are you waiting for? Let's go." Chapter 1588. Zhang Feng didn't hide anything. After all, these things weren't any secret. As long as they had a certain proportion, almost everyone would be able to make them. The prerequisite was that you could obtain the saltpeter from the Ministry of Works. Most importantly, after letting them take a look at these things today, the manufacturing would be left to them in the future. He didn't have the time or energy to spend here. The most important thing was, right now, Yu Shinan and the other Confucian scholars were all staring at him. If this went on and they decided to quit, then Zhang Feng would be left with nothing but tears to cry about. The cave was no longer a small place on the edge of a cliff like before. At this time, the cave had changed from a mountain path on the cliff that could only accommodate one horse carriage to a large flat area. There were several large clay furnaces of unknown use in the area, as well as a large furnace made of pieces of stone that was burning without a ball, making the entire area steaming hot. In the middle was the cave. At this time, the layout of the cave was somewhat luxurious. A large iron door with the words, "White Deer College Forging Workshop," written on it. It made him look a little extraordinary. At this time, at the entrance of the cave, the 30 or so craftsmen who were originally brought from the western regions were standing neatly on both sides with their backs bowed. After seeing Zhang Feng, all of them hurriedly bowed. "Dean." Zhang Feng saw the shock on the faces of Yu Qigong and the others and couldn't help but feel a little smug. The effects of the alcohol had also weakened a little. He waved his hand and said, "Hello everyone. Go and do your work. Today we're just here to take a look, just take a look. Go, let's go in and take a look." As Zhang Feng spoke, he beckoned Li Yuan to go with him. When the others saw this, they didn't dare to act rashly. They hurriedly followed the two into the cave. Li Yuan had yearned for this cave for a long time. However, without Zhang Feng's permission, even Yu Shinan and the others couldn't enter. From this, it could be seen how much Zhang Feng valued this place. Not to mention this cave. Once they entered the cave, everyone saw the situation inside. The walls of the cave were polished very smooth, just like a house. Near the entrance of the cave, there were two large windows. However, at this time, it was sealed by iron bars and transparent glass. The entire cave looked as bright as an outdoor room. In the center of the cave, there was still a long table. On both sides of the table were countless forging tables and furnaces. Next to the furnaces were iron hammers of various sizes. However, at this time, these furnaces seemed to have not been lit for a long time. There was not a trace of dry temperature in the air. On this platform, the person who had gone out to welcome the crowd had returned. He continued to sit in front of the platform, fiddling with something. There was a large bamboo tube, a pile of wax, and a small scale. That was not all. On the left side of these things, there was a piece of oil paper. In front of the oil paper, there were 3 large frames. Waves of unpleasant smell were emitted from it. These people carefully picked up some powder from these boxes, placed it on a scale, weighed it, and then mixed it. It was really Li Yuan's first time seeing such a magical thing. How could Yu Qigong and the others not be the same? At this time, each of their eyes were wide open, like gongs. The most important thing was that each of these people was wearing white gloves. Their mouths were also covered with masks. This made them even more curious. They looked around. Zhang Feng did not see any problems. There was almost no mistake in the ratio of gunpowder. At this time, he could not help but ask, "Alkinen, just now, you said that the barrel would explode. What's going on?" Hearing this, the others could not help but look over. Alkinen did not say anything. He just led Zhang Feng to a small stone room in the innermost part of the cave. After pushing open the door, they could smell the strong smell of gunpowder. There were also several bamboo tubes on a shelf. He said, "Sir Dean, according to your instructions, we sealed these gunpowder into small bamboo tubes according to a certain ratio. However, I don't know what happened today. I took this thing and prepared to store it in the warehouse. I saw smoke coming out of it. Before I could go far, this thing exploded." Hearing this, Li Yuan and the others could not help but open their eyes even wider. He curiously interrupted the two and asked, "Fengzi, can we first tell you what this thing is?" "Yes, you are always speaking in riddles. Is this okay?" Seeing that the others were a little dissatisfied, Zhang Feng waved his hand and asked Alkinen to take out a few bamboo tubes from the warehouse. He said, "This thing is gunpowder. It's the thing I mentioned last time." Gunpowder. This thing seemed to be really terrifying. Last time, Zhang Feng had mentioned this thing when they were frying fish. However, after that, they had never seen this thing again. Today, these people, could it be that they were producing this kind of thing? The few of them looked at each other. Seeing Zhang Fenghua Entertainment's Arjunan walking out, they hurriedly followed. Chapter 1589. Said the cave. Only then did everyone carefully see the shape of the bamboo tube. The bamboo tube was very similar to the one used to store beer. Everyone even seriously suspected that this thing was actually that bamboo tube. However, the bamboo tube was now covered with a thick layer of oil paper, and there was a green thread on the outside. It was covered with wax droplets. Seeing this, everyone couldn't help but be even more puzzled. "Fengzi, is this the gunpowder?" Li Yuan leaned forward, completely ignoring Wei Zheng and Fang Xianling, who were pale with fright. Zhang Feng nodded and said somewhat pretentiously, "Yes, this is the gunpowder. Do you want to try its power, old master?" "Fengzi, you can't let the old master do this thing. Old master, Fengzi is a fraud. Don't believe Fengzi's words." Zhang Feng couldn't help but roll his eyes. He said loudly, "This thing is actually just a large firecracker. If you really add some other things, hee, do you think the explosion just now is its power?" Come. Old you, I see that your face is glowing. It seems that great luck is coming. Why don't you do it?" Yu Qigong was not that stupid. At this time, Zhang Feng thought of him. There must be a trick. At this time, he pretended not to hear. He put his arm around Wei Zheng's neck and muttered, leaving Zhang Feng with a back view that said, "I don't have time." Zhang Feng smacked his lips and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Damn it. Coward. He really didn't dare to let Li Yuan do it. He mainly wanted to provoke these two guys. However, these two delivery guys were just masters of thunder but not rain. They were very cunning. He could only twitch his mouth and ask Alkinen to bring a large steel pipe to experiment with this thing. Only then did they look at the steel pipe as thick as the mouth of a bowl. Their eyes were full of splendor. Zhang Feng didn't say anything. He and Alkinen sealed this section of the pipe. Only one end of the pipe had a mouth. They aimed it at a big tree about 100 steps away. After drawing for a while, Zhang Feng carefully took out a match. This time, everyone, who had been so bored that they were about to doze off, suddenly woke up and hurriedly looked at Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng glanced at the crowd with a sinister look. Without saying a word, he lit the fuse of the firecracker in Alkinen's trembling hand and quickly threw it into the steel pipe. After that, the two of them squatted down with their hands covering their ears. This, boom, without waiting for Li Yuan to ask. Instantly, a sound that could pierce everyone's eardrums made Li Yuan stagger and squat on the ground with his butt. Yu Qigong and the others didn't have it easy either. This unexpected attack caused everyone's vision to darken. As the earth quaked and the mountains swayed, several people were stunned. He was dumbfounded. Everyone was dumbfounded as they looked at the nearby tree that had been blown to smithereens. In that instant, the few of them only felt a loud bang and a tremor. Then, a ball of fire spurted out from that thing that was as thick as a bowl. That's right, it was fire. After that, the tree was reduced to its current state in front of everyone's eyes. Then there was smoke all over the sky. Gunpowder smoke. The few of them came back to their senses. At this time, The few of them didn't even have the sound of breathing cold air. Everyone looked at Zhang Feng with a dumbfounded face and then looked at the big tree that was slowly burning in the smoke at this time. Their scalps couldn't help but feel numb. Was this the power of gunpowder? If it was placed on the battlefield, what would his mother do? Is this the cannon you were talking about? This is gunpowder? Zhang Feng felt a burst of comfort at this time. With both hands on his waist, he lit a cigarette and said, "That's right, this thing is the gunpowder I was talking about. But today is the first time we've seen the test product. As for the finished product, it's still early." "No, I mean this firecracker, we've all seen it before. But you put it in a bamboo tube, how can it be so powerful? Isn't this a little illogical?" Yu Qigong finally came back to his senses at this time. He moved closer to the steel pipe that had been blown apart and was still emitting black smoke at this time. He looked at it and kicked it, saying, "Feng, tell me this thing, how can it be so powerful?" Zhang Feng snorted with incomparable arrogance. "You don't know this, do you? This thing, to put it bluntly, is the combination of aerodynamics and aerodynamics." When the few of them heard this, black lines hung on their foreheads. "Damn it, can't you speak properly?" Yu Qigong's face darkened and he glared at him. Zhang Feng chuckled and shook a finger for a long time before saying, "You want to know? Go back and ask your son." Damn it! Yu Qigong finally couldn't take it anymore. He went up and pressed Zhang Feng to the ground. However, at this time, Yu Shinan came in a hurry with Trung Chumo and the others. They also happened to see this scene. From afar, they roared angrily, "Old man, damn it, stop it." Chapter 1590. Someone came. It was the 7 old men who had been alarmed by the sound just now. Yu Shinan, Li Gang, Sun Simiao, and the other 7 old men were worried when Fang Xianling and Wei Jing came to stop Zhang Feng and the retired emperor from making trouble, so they wandered outside. It was to prevent just in case. After all, the retired emperor's character was more eccentric, and Zhang Feng was not easy to deal with. At this time, the 2 of them were together, wouldn't they turn the sky upside down? Although they had never been to this workshop, they knew about the fish explosion last time, and they could hear Chung Chumo and the others bragging all day long that they could break mountains and split rocks. If such a powerful thing was solved by these 2 drunkards, wouldn't it be a big problem? At this time, as expected. Then, an earth-shaking sound was heard. How could this be? They hurriedly ran over. As soon as they arrived, they saw that the basin-sized locust tree at the entrance of the workshop was gone. Not only was it blown apart, but it was also burning with a raging fire. Moreover, they didn't know when that old man Yu Qigong came. At this time, he even dared to ride on Zhang Feng and wanted to hit people. Who was Zhang Feng? He was the face of the Tang dynasty, the youngest great scholar in the Tang dynasty, and even the world. How could he be treated like this by a big uncouth man? Preposterous. This is really preposterous. Old Yu, if you don't explain this matter clearly to us today, do you believe that we won't go find His Majesty and ask for justice? The old man was so angry that his face was pale. He picked up a burning stick that was as thick as an arm and ran over. At this time, Yu Qigong also came to his senses. He turned around and saw that Qing Yaojin and the others had already hidden in the cave with Li Yuan and the others. Gulp. Yu Qigong swallowed his saliva with difficulty, then put on a fake smile and said, "Hee about that, I was just joking with Fengzi. Hee, why are you here?" Zhang Feng also reacted. There was nothing he could do. He wanted to play dumb, but the soft flesh on his waist was hurting. He could only grimace and slowly crawl up with Yu Qigong and say, "Respected teachers, what a coincidence. I was just joking with old Yu. This grandson lost a bet with me, and now he's going back on his word." Bet? Yu Qigong was stunned. Li Yuan instantly snorted, but still forcefully endured it. Wei Zheng and the others were also holding their breaths until the sky turned red. This kid was definitely up to no good. You want this kid to suffer a loss? Dream on. Yu Shinan and the others were also dumbfounded. At this time, they came forward and looked up and down at Zhang Feng. After seeing that there was nothing wrong with him, they breathed a sigh of relief. They stared at Zhang Feng and said, You're already so old, but you don't pay attention to your manners at all. If the students see this, what will happen? What else could Zhang Feng do besides smiling apologetically? Seeing Zhang Feng like this, they didn't have the intention to ask. They just pointed at Yu Qigong and said, "What's going on?" Yu Qigong looked behind him, then looked at Zhang Feng and said, "Isn't this the gunpowder that this kid made? He just wanted to test its power, but I didn't expect this kid to be a..." Before he finished, he was stunned to see that these people actually abandoned him and squatted on the ground to look at the iron pipe that was still smoking, and asked Zhang Feng some things. This time, Yu Qigong was embarrassed. He couldn't wait to find a hole to hide in. But now, he had made up his mind to get this thing in the Chang and military camp. Even if this thing wasn't used to fight a war, it would still be awesome if it was used to fire a cannon every New Year and other festivals. And that long spear, at this time, Yu Qigong wanted to get one back no matter what. Otherwise, today's matter wouldn't be fun. On the other side, Li Yuan was embarrassed to hide, and he, Alkinen and the others got out from behind the iron gate of the cave leisurely. At this time, Li Yuan's eyes had already been attracted by the big tree not far away. Although it had been extinguished by the people in the workshop, the shocking scene just now still made them feel extremely uncomfortable and shocked. This was what the Tang dynasty should have. This was simply a divine weapon given by God to the Tang dynasty. Compared with this thing, the long spear just now was nothing. "Old master, are you okay just now?" Right at this moment, Yu Shernan and the others hurriedly crowded over, sizing up Li Yuan from head to toe as they asked. Li Yuan waved his hand to show that he was okay, and then he waved his hand and said, "It's okay, it's okay." Compared with such a divine weapon, even if it's hurt, it's a blessing. Hearing this, they couldn't help but turn pale with fright. But Li Yuan still waved his hand and said, "The shame of Wei River last time. If we had this thing in the Tang dynasty, how many people would be able to live, and we wouldn't have to suffer the shame of the foreign barbarians." Although Li Yuan and Li Shimin fell out because of the Black Tortoise Gate last time, this matter was a national shame, and Li Yuan could still distinguish between right and wrong. At this time, Yu Qigong rolled his eyes and hurriedly said, "God bless the Tang dynasty. If the Tang dynasty can have such a divine weapon in the future, we don't have to be so scared anymore. This is really a blessing for the Tang dynasty." Zhang Feng couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Looking at this group of fanatics, he couldn't help but criticize in his heart, "I say, whether this thing is a blessing for the great Tang or not, what does it have to do with you?" Chapter 1591. From a businessman's point of view, they really felt like they were worrying too much. But who were they? They were the pillars of the Tang dynasty. At this moment, it was undoubtedly normal for him to let out such a sigh. At this time, the Tang dynasty had been bullied and robbed by the Turks. Who wouldn't be excited to have this thing? Who wouldn't be happy? Therefore, the actions of these people at this moment were the most normal. Only Zhang Feng didn't know. Li Yuan smiled and didn't explain. He stepped forward and said, "Fengzi, this thing is a cannon, right?" Zhang Feng nodded, but then he shook his head and said, "It's true that he is, but it's also true that he isn't. He's just a tool to test gunpowder. A real cannon can be fired in one shot. Do you see that small hill?" While speaking, Zhang Feng pointed at a small mound not far away that was at least 10 meters tall and said, "That's it. One blast is enough to blow it up." Alkinen couldn't help but exclaim, "Dean, do you think this thing is so powerful?" Looking at the bamboo tube in his hand, Alkinen almost threw it down the cliff. Wei Zheng and Fang Xianling also reacted. They hurriedly pulled Li Yuan away from Alkinen. Seeing this, Alkinen's eyes showed a trace of madness, but more of shock and fear. If this thing was really made, it would be made by him. But because he made it himself that night, he knew better than anyone the power of this thing. In fact, it couldn't collapse a mountain. That was why he asked. Zhang Feng nodded and said, "Of course. This thing is just in its initial state. It can't even be considered a cannonball. Once it's covered with a metal shell and filled with steel needles and iron sand, you can try it." Hearing this, Alkinen couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He didn't see the scene of a fish explosion last time. But this thing, Zhang Feng had told him before, The principle of this thing was that it relied on the energy produced by the instant explosion and the instant release of the impact. Although he didn't understand the impact and the power of the explosion. But last time, he really saw Zhang Feng get a glass bottle from Mokido. Then he poured some of this stuff into it. Just a little bit was enough to turn a whole vat into powder. That power, now that he thought about it, even a steel pipe could turn red from the explosion. That was the hardest metal he had ever seen, but if it was replaced with iron, then the power of this fist-sized gunpowder could really flatten this mountain, right? And the most excited at this time were none other than Yu Qigong, Qing Yaojin, and Li Yuan. The three of them hurriedly pulled Zhang Feng to the side and asked carefully, "Feng Zi, let's not talk nonsense first. Just tell us, what kind of cannon is this? You said it could flatten this small hill. Even if you said it could flatten the entire Shao Mountain, we would believe you. But you have to make this one. Your flowery mouth makes people feel uncomfortable." Zhang Feng's biggest problem was procrastination and bragging. At this time, they saw everything but he just didn't make it for them. Wasn't that infuriating? No wonder Yu Qigong wanted to beat Zhang Feng up just now. This kid was asking for a beating. However, Zhang Feng also had concerns. Although this thing was easy to make. But this was compared to the situation in the future where everything was ready. In this era where you had to do everything by yourself once you opened your mouth, Zhang Feng really couldn't do it. And most importantly, this thing really couldn't be made just because you said so. Especially that kind of cannon. Although the principle was simple, you had to consider many things such as the caliber, the weight, the range, the length of the barrel, the accuracy, and how many times a cannon could withstand continuous fire before the barrel exploded. These things all needed him to think about and match. After all, he wasn't an arms dealer. If it wasn't for the fact that Xiaoxi City was an important hub for the trade routes, and if it wasn't for the fact that the old emperor had promised to hand over all the matters of the merchants in Xiaoxi City to Zhang Feng wouldn't have bothered to do it. If this thing was used well, it wouldn't be a problem to rule the world. If it wasn't used well, if this thing was used by those with bad intentions, then the consequences, heh, go get your lunchbox. This was what Zhang Feng was most worried about. Therefore, Zhang Feng delayed as much as he could. Seeing that everyone was asking so seriously, Zhang Feng said, "I said it would take 10 days, but I only need 1 day to make the barrel. The problem is that it needs to be tested. Its range, accuracy, and so on. Don't talk nonsense with me. Just tell me when will it be done. When it's done, I'm still waiting to make one to play with." Yu Qigong stroked his messy beard as he asked anxiously with reddened eyes. Zhang Feng was stunned. Glancing at Li Yuan, who had a strange expression, he bumped his elbow and asked in a low voice, "Old man, did this guy become stupid from the explosion just now?" Hearing this, Li Yuan shook his head and said, "I think, more or less." Chapter 1592. Yu Qigong's face darkened when he heard that. Cheng Yaojin was quick-witted and pulled Yu Qigong back. In fact, he was as anxious as Yu Qigong. However, this thing could not be produced by being anxious. Instead, the more anxious you were, the less anxious he would be. That was the most worrying thing. Most importantly, if you push it too far, what will you do if you expose yourself? He could only wait for the retired emperor to say something. Seeing that Yu Qigong had calmed down, Li Yuan shook his head and said with some displeasure, "Fengzi will naturally keep this matter in mind. Although old man knows that you are anxious for the comfort of your family members, I can wait." Zhang Feng only remembered when he heard that. He had only met Lao Li's wife and his youngest son. As for the others, he had not met them. Hearing the old master's words, Zhang Feng realized that something was wrong. He asked hurriedly, "Old master, do you mean that Lao Yu's family members are all in Xiaoxi?" Yu Qigong did not react in time. However, Qing Yaojin reacted. He sighed and said, "Of course. This old fellow's first wife and an old uncle are all in Xiaoxi. Many of our warehouses are also there. Do you think he won't be anxious?" This time, Zhang Feng was finally stunned by this solid news. He stopped smiling. He pondered for a while and said, "Well, we can't rush this matter. This is all there is to it, Arkan." As he spoke, Zhang Feng waved his hand and pointed at Wei Zheng and Qing Yaojin. From now on, I won't interfere except for academic matters and related details. I'll leave this matter to them. If you have any problems, you can look for them directly. Also, from now on, share the manufacturing blueprint of this thing with them. It's best if you teach it to anyone they bring here within tomorrow. How about it? Comfortable. So King comfortable. The retired emperor was still the best. A simple sentence was enough to make Zhang Feng fall for it. Li Yuan also felt that it was somewhat miraculous. Zhang Feng was actually so easy to talk to today, but they didn't know that Zhang Feng didn't want to care about this mess for a long time. This thing was like a barrel of explosives. Whoever touched it would be unlucky. If this thing fell into the hands of bad people, he wanted to live for a few more years. Moreover, the manufacture of firearms had always been a business where one's life was at stake. Once the emperor was happy, you would be promoted to an official. However, if you made a mistake, or if this thing malfunctioned on the battlefield, you would lose your head. Even if someone were to protect you, those civil officials would still impeach you. This kind of thing had happened countless times in history. Zhang Feng remembered it clearly, so when Li Yuan came to find him today, he understood this old man's meaning. Then I'll just give it to you. He didn't have to worry about anything and could even earn a sum of money for free. How great was that? At this moment, Zhang Feng was put down by Li Yuan. Li Yuan as well as Wei Zheng and the others crowded around Jin Jinan, making Jin Jinan so excited that his whole body trembled. The old scholar lit a cigarette, patted Zhang Feng's shoulder, handed him the cigarette, and used his eyes to signal Zhang Feng to follow him. Zhang Feng stared blankly. This was the first time he saw the old scholar's expression so cautious. Originally, Yu Shinan wanted to follow, but was stopped by Li Gang. The five of them looked at Zhang Feng somewhat responsibly, then looked at Li Yuan and the others, and returned to the villa again. Zhang Feng followed the old scholar to the edge of the gray building. At this time, the gray building was extremely quiet. Apart from the horsetail whisk tied to a thin bamboo pole at the entrance dancing in the wind, there were only the sounds of roosters crowing, dogs barking, and piglets humming. The two of them sat by the stream outside the gray building. Looking at a few loaches and eels in the flowing water, the old scholar said, "Look, how beautiful it is here." Before this old man has always wanted to have such a peaceful environment. Here, there is no longer a hierarchy. Everyone will no longer have to worry about their stomachs. Everyone only has one goal, and that is to become better, to become better. The peace here makes me feel like I'm in a dream. While speaking, the old scholar looked at Zhang Feng solemnly again and said, "Fengzi, the old man doesn't know why you set up this academy, and I don't know whether it's right or wrong. Tell me, what are your plans for the future? If you want to be a great Confucian scholar, then why do you want to bring out military science and these murderous beasts?" The old man has witnessed many wars with his own eyes. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's hell. Have you ever seen such a scene? Hearing this, Zhang Feng took a deep breath and said, "No, I haven't." "Then why do you want to bring out such a thing? Don't you know that the lives of the people now will only truly enter the door of peace and well-being after your phosphate fertilizer is produced? But why do you want to bring out such a thing at this critical time?" Zhang Feng did not avoid the old scholar's eyes, and said firmly, "Because I only want to protect the people I care about." Chapter 1593. Old Xianxia was silent. He looked at Zhang Feng for a long time before he said, "But there's no need to make these things, is there?" Zhang Feng shook his head. "Old Xianxia, it's easy to understand. Since the Han Dynasty, we've been at war with foreign countries. So, they know us very well and we know them very well. Not to mention other places, just in Chang and City, there are countless spies reporting to the Tujue from time to time. So, if he dares to attack Xianxia at this time, it means that he knows everything about the Tang dynasty like the back of his hand. Tell me, do you think 300,000 people, or even more, can win against a small army of 100,000 in Xianxia? Once Xianxia city falls, Longyu Road behind him will be a flat land. Then, the people in Tubo who are in internal strife will seize the opportunity to counterattack. At that time, Longyu, will have no chance to defend. At that time, it won't be the Wei River Alliance, but directly. So, If we don't have anything unexpected, how can we defend this city? So, old Xianxia, it's really not my idea. And the current situation is like this. If there's no innovation, I'm not exaggerating, but there's really no chance of winning this battle. Even if there are ballistae and other things now, I have no chance of winning. That's why I made this cannon. I didn't want to make it before. But I also made this thing after hesitating for a long time. I know better than anyone how dangerous this thing is. That's why I hesitated for a long time before giving it to old you. Old Xianxia sighed and said, "No. You're wrong. Even so, have you thought about what it means if you really give it to them? It means that you're pushing them to the edge of a mountain of swords." Old Xianxia naturally knew what Yu Qigong was trying to do. He wanted to help Zhang Feng take the blame for this. The most important thing was to get this thing out as soon as possible. Everything had its pros and cons. The pros were that it could prevent the Tang dynasty's soldiers from suffering too many casualties. The cons were, if there was even the slightest problem with this thing, then everything today would be for naught. Almost everyone involved in this matter was going to lose their heads. At first, the old scholar didn't understand why Yu Qigong took the initiative to take the blame. However, he suddenly understood after chatting with Zhang Feng and when he was in the forging workshop just now. He finally understood why they had taken the initiative to shoulder these things so many times before. From Li Yuan taking the initiative to step down from his duties as the honorary vice president of White Deer College, to Li Qingqian telling the public that he was the one who did it, and so on. At this moment, they all understood. They were all protecting Zhang Feng and wouldn't be discovered so early by the people outside. As a result, the tree stood out from the forest. However, this was all in other aspects. Everything changed when it came to military matters. Previously, the civil and military officials of the court had been able to share the benefits equally. Regardless of whether it was the white paper, the braised meat, or the fine salt, they were all the same. However, this arms business was related to the safety of the Tang dynasty. Even if the emperor was willing, the hundreds of officials in the court wouldn't allow these things to fall into the hands of a great general. Thinking of this, the old scholar couldn't help but sigh and say, "Fengzi, do you understand this matter?" How could Zhang Feng not understand? In fact, he had thought about these things a long time ago. In fact, he had thought even further. If these things didn't have the emperor's permission, not to mention Lao Li, anyone who came to ask about it would die. Not to mention being able to supervise the production of weapons on this deserted mountain. Their heads would be chopped off at any minute. Zhang Feng also wanted to see what Li Shimin's intentions were. He had done so many things, such a big thing. According to history, if Li Shimin was thirsty for talent, he should have invited him to the palace long ago. But now, he didn't even appear. He even sent a message saying that it was to protect him. Zhang Feng knew that at this time, he didn't dare to show his face. However, people were curious. Once it rose, it couldn't be extinguished. At this time, Zhang Feng happened to be like this. Once the desire rose in his heart, it couldn't be extinguished. Especially this kind of thing. If there was even the slightest mistake, Zhang Feng would definitely turn around and run away. The most important thing was that without the dynasty's arms business, without the emperor's approval, who would dare to do it? At this time, the old man hurriedly asked for the spear and sent it down the mountain. What did he mean by this? He must have sent it to the palace. He sent it to the emperor. Then old Yu came. This had already proved everything. Ever since the emperor learned that Lao Li and the others went up the mountain and saw the longbow and crossbow with their own eyes, he couldn't forget about this invincible spear. So today he did this to him. Zhang Feng couldn't help but criticize him in his mind. Chang and city wasn't far from Shao Mountain. If it really didn't work, you could have come here. Lao Tzu had been in the Tang dynasty for almost a year, but he hadn't even seen the emperor's face. If it still didn't work, you could have just issued a secret edict and directly asked me to go to the palace to meet the emperor. Did you have to let Lao Li and the others go back and forth like this? Did you have to? Chapter 1594. Zhang Feng felt a headache coming on. He knew that the old scholar was thinking of him. The reason why the old scholar hadn't come to see him for such a long time was not because he didn't have anything to say, but because Zhang Feng hadn't touched the root of the problem yet. The reason why the old scholar came to see him alone this time was that he was worried about his safety. Zhang Feng patted the old scholar's shoulder and said with emotion, "Old scholar, I know you mean well, but there's something I want you to understand. The reason why I made these things was not because I'm hot-blooded or a saint, but because I want to protect the people I like to play and the people I love. Among them are Jingshu, Yu Yao, and you, the old village chief, Lao Li, and the others. Because of these factors, I came up with these things. Now that the world has just settled down, and there are people coveting it, if I don't make any preparations, then I can't be on guard against the eyes in the dark every day, can I? That's why I decided to make these things." And then, the old scholar's eyes were moist when he heard this. But seeing Zhang Feng hesitating, he couldn't help but ask, "So what?" Zhang Feng took a deep breath and said, "So I plan to equip the security guards on the mountain with these things after they are made, and then give them more rigorous military training." In fact, Zhang Feng had this plan early in the morning. But he didn't know the emperor's temperament, so he wanted to test him. Last time, the crossbow and the bow were the guiding stones. He wanted to see if the emperor would let him enter the palace to meet the emperor. But he thought too much. The emperor still didn't make a move. What did that mean? The emperor's wisdom was unparalleled. This was Zhang Feng's guess. Otherwise, there wouldn't be the heavenly Khan and the rule of Xinguan. How could a coward create a prosperous era? Therefore, Zhang Feng guessed that at this time, the emperor either encountered something difficult or was dealing with the people of the 5 surnames and 7 clans. And he was the key to these matters, so he repeatedly asked Lao Li to come forward. Even Li Xiaogong did not come. What did this mean? This meant that he seemed to have been in the limelight last time. Moreover, Hou Junji was no ordinary person. The faction behind him was an existence that no one could hope to reach. Now, Hou Junji had fallen. However, the people and forces behind him were still there. In order to protect himself, they would definitely do something unexpected. And Li Shimin, in order to protect the royal family and stabilize the various forces, was busy cleaning up his mess. Thinking of this, Zhang Feng had some sympathy for Li Shimin. It's not easy to be an emperor. This tangled web of relationships was enough to give one a headache, let alone the other things. Even Zhang Feng would only be able to chuckle when he thought about it. Zhang Feng's eyes also darkened. Zhang Feng couldn't help but feel a pang of heartache. These ancient emperors, if they didn't die of exhaustion in their beds, they would die of exhaustion writing memorials to the court. It would be strange if they could live for so long. What the hell was this thing that they ran into every day? It would be strange if they could live for so long. It was no wonder that Li Shimin's hair had turned white before the age of 40. How could he not have turned white? First, there was the Guanlong group and the 5 surnames and 7 clans, and then there was the Turkic Khaganate and Tubo covetously eyeing him. It would be strange if he didn't suffer. And at this time, let's just talk about himself. The appearance of phosphate fertilizer was certain to affect the businesses of many corporations. Coupled with the matter with Hou Junji, anyone with a brain would know that this was his idea. Now that the news had been leaked, no one would be able to hide it from them. There might even be spies watching him right now. Although these weapons could be hidden for a while, they couldn't be hidden forever. When the war on the border broke out, these weapons were bound to be exposed. At that time, the excitement would be great. Although the emperor had tacitly agreed to the production of this stuff and had stationed the Chang and garrison at the foot of the mountain, he was brewing it at the foot of the mountain. It wasn't a real defense. Putting aside everything else, just how awesome was the Qin first emperor? Wasn't there still someone who could enter the imperial palace? This was the imperial palace. Where was this place? This was just a mountain, an academy at the top of the mountain. Although there were natural barriers like Mount E and the Qinling Mountains, none of this was a problem if one wanted to. Zhang Feng had thought of this long ago. After all, he really didn't want to die. When he thought about how he could invite these scourges down the mountain, Zhang Feng couldn't help but feel much more relaxed. Old scholar, I know what you're worried about. When the time comes, this thing will always be a hot potato in our hands. If we give it to them now, they'll definitely give it to the emperor. Based on what I know, those things were given to the Chang and barracks, and General Yu Qigong was personally guarding them. This is the safest place. Think about it. on the battlefield, what's the most important place? It's the provisions and supplies, as well as the armory. You've also seen what we have. These are things that will be hunted down for tens of thousands of li. You've also seen how terrifying these things are. The old scholar could no longer withstand Zhang Feng's brainwashing. He hurriedly stopped Zhang Feng and said, I understand what you mean. You mean you want to throw this thing to someone else and be a hands-off shopkeeper? Chapter 1595. Zhang Feng smiled embarrassedly. This was his usual style. Although old Xiaoxian came alone, he could imagine how comfortable old Xiaoxian would be if he didn't serve him. Then, when Yu Shernan and Ouyang Sun came, he wouldn't even have the chance to bang his head against the wall. Those people's mouths were comparable to those of ghosts. Zhang Feng admitted that he couldn't handle it. Even a normal person would explode from these endless questions, let alone a few Confucian scholars. At this time, Li Gang and Sun Simiao were not included. If they were included, then he. Seeing that the old scholar was almost settled, Zhang Feng heaved a sigh of relief. Old scholar, you don't have to worry about this. I know what I'm doing. Ever since the incident with Qian Wanli, I've been thinking about how to turn Mount Shao into a fortress. At the very least, even if something big happens, this mountain will still be able to stand firm. That's why I have these plans. The old scholar was silent. In fact, he had been thinking about this for a long time. Even from the incident in Chang and City until now, these old guys had discussed it for a long time. But they didn't come to Zhang Feng. After all, Zhang Feng's talent was there for all to see. And Zhang Feng's sophistry and strategic ability were simply better than all the people present combined. But today, the reason why he stood out was because of these things. If these things were used well, he would be a sharp sword that could kill people. But a sharp sword was a sharp sword. When a certain time came, it would become a double-edged sword. When killing the enemy, it would add countless things to fear. And once these things were created, there would be more and more of them. In the end, it would become a counterattack. They didn't want to see Zhang Feng go on the road of no return because of this matter. But now, after hearing Zhang Feng's words, the old scholar understood. Nodding his head, he sighed and said, All right, I'll go talk to Brother Bo Shi. We're just afraid that you'll go down the wrong path and harm you. After all, you are now the dean of the White Deer Academy. Behind you, there are countless people who are watching and learning from you. What kind of person you have become, what kind of person will be the people you teach. Therefore, us old men are worried that these things will cause you to lose your way and cause the entire White Deer Academy to be destroyed. Zhang Feng heard this and hurriedly nodded his head like a rattle drum. Yes, you're right. I've learned my lesson. The old scholar was speechless. He smacked his lips and didn't know what to say. He waved his hand and said with a heavy heart, All right, you can go. This old man still has to take a look at the situation in the classroom. After all, Ma Zhou and those brats are still unable to hold the fort. Can't hold the situation? Zhang Feng was a little confused. He asked, What do you mean? When the old elementary scholar heard this, he walked with Zhang Feng and said, It's all because of you. Now all the students are like crazy, imitating you all day long. Even Ma Zhou and the others are having trouble teaching them. It's all because of these guys. They have too many problems. Zhang Feng was shocked when he heard this. This wasn't a good sign. At this time, they were already thinking of flying. How could he let this go? Go. I'm going to teach these bastards a lesson. As Zhang Feng spoke, he rolled up his sleeves and walked in the direction of the church. The old scholar was delighted. Zhang Feng hadn't been to school for a long time. Naturally, he had to go. But when he thought of the smelting workshop, he couldn't help but have a headache. Then what do you plan to do here? Zhang Feng waved his hand carelessly. It doesn't matter. Just watch. By the end of my lesson, these guys still haven't come to a conclusion. After all, those blueprints, even if Algernon were to teach, he would have to teach for more than 2 hours, not to mention gunpowder and other things. Besides, do you think old you and the others came here for the cannon and gunpowder? The old scholar was stunned. He suddenly remembered the big stone by the lake that was shattered by Li Yuan's spear. Could it be that they also came here for the spear? Zhang Feng nodded with certainty. That's right. Think about it, Old Yu and the others' sons dream of going to the battlefield to make a name for themselves. Now that they have such divine weapons, but they are all prepared for Ligan and Gao, Kansas. How can they not be anxious? That would be strange. Thus, at this moment what they want to see the most is that spear. If I were to let them obtain it so easily, wouldn't it mean that my spear was too cheap? The old scholar was stunned. Then he couldn't help but laugh. You little brat, you're really mean. Zhang Feng laughed and didn't explain. The two of them strolled along the way. The old scholar told him what had happened in the academy during this time. While they were talking, the two of them had already arrived outside the ethics classroom on the first floor. At this time in the classroom, Hao Chujun was asked by more than 30 students. His face was pale, and there was a fine layer of sweat on his forehead. Seeing Zhang Feng arrive, Hao Chujun was surprised and overjoyed. As if he had found a life-saving straw, he hurriedly invited Zhang Feng into the classroom. Then the group of students also hurriedly got up. Welcome, headmaster. Chapter 1596. Zhang Feng pretended to be serious, just like the class teacher when he was young. He ignored the standing students with a straight face and slowly flipped through the textbook on the podium. He waved his hand and said, Teacher, Chujun, please sit in. The two of them didn't know what Zhang Feng wanted to do, but seeing Zhang Feng like this, Hao Chujun was very excited. It had been a long time since he had listened to Zhang Feng's lecture. Moreover, at this time, these fellows seemed to be flying in the sky. They were a group of people who were hard to please. Looking at Mr. Zihuai following them, it was obvious that Mr. Zihuai had invited his benefactor here. He hurriedly brought 2 chairs over and placed them at the door. And the old scholar, logically speaking, this was the first time he saw Zhang Feng give a lecture, so he sat down expectantly. Zhang Feng's arrival instantly caused an uproar in the teaching area. Everyone knew about it in an instant. He came from afar to give a lecture in Class 1. Followed by a cry of surprise. In an instant, all the students were stunned for a moment. Then they exploded in an instant. Wow! The dean is here? Is this true? I remember that the dean has never given a lecture in the classroom before. Get lost, have you forgotten that he fixed the leg of that guy last time? The leg fixing incident last time was famous all over the world. I wonder what the dean will say now that he's here? Who cares? Bring a pen and paper and a stool, let's go. This is a rare opportunity. In an instant, the whole teaching area was in an uproar. All the students went crazy, carrying stools with a pen and paper in their mouths and an inkstone in their arms, rushing to the classroom on the first floor. Fortunately, it was on the first floor. If it was on the second or third floor, wouldn't the room be full of students blocking the corridor like a pile of cotton wool? And Ma Zhou, Lai Ji and the others were dumbfounded. Looking at the empty classroom in an instant, the chalk in their hands on the blackboard turned into powder at this time. Teacher actually went to Hao Chujun to give a lecture? In an instant. A few of them couldn't sit still. They all followed the students and squeezed their way over. Although they were now teachers in name, and this term was invented by the dean, they didn't know the difference between them and teachers. However, this was also a kind of affirmation of their status. After all, they were still students. At this moment, he only knew a little more than those people. They were also students. So when they heard that Zhang Feng was teaching at Hao Chujun's place, how could they not be excited? On the other side, in the dormitory area, Chen Chumo and the others, who were numbly knocking on the water wheel and modifying it over and over again, had long been annoyed to death. Ever since they saw the retired emperor and Zhang Feng going to the smelting workshop, they felt like their hearts were being scratched by a cat. After that, everyone heard the explosion. They wanted to go too. However, they didn't follow Zhang Feng's orders. They also saw that Zhang Feng was drunk. If he went there now, he would be courting death. Most importantly, they had heard that Li Chengqian was going to go to Chiotzi City with Gao Kan and Niu Jinda. Fight stage. This was what they had been dreaming of all this time. At this moment, they could only watch Li Chengqian and Gao Kan show off in front of them. How could they not be angry and want to beat them up? Although Li Chengqian had been dealing with the aftermath in the palace. But this Gao Kan kept swaying around, and he even put on an indifferent look. Don't you think it's infuriating? However, The reality was cruel. The few of them together couldn't beat Gao Can unless they used tricks. That would be a violation of discipline. Once they provoked Gao Can, who dared to break down Zhang Feng's door, who would dare to beat him? They could only stare at Gao Can angrily with hidden bitterness. The point was that this guy actually acted as if nothing had happened and floated around them. Oh no! At this moment, along with a shout from afar. In an instant, the few people who were originally absent-minded had their souls stolen away. Du Go looked at the students who were jumping up and down in excitement, as well as the crowd on the first floor of the teaching block. He couldn't help but jump in fright. Tai Nyo, what's going on? Did Hao Chu-jun get into a fight? At the mention of a fight, Cheng Chumo's eyes instantly turned red. He had been working on this water wheel for the past few days and it made his scalp numb. At this time, he had long wanted to find someone to beat up to vent his anger. How could he sit still when he heard this? He picked up the axe in his hand and rushed up. Wei Shuyu, Fang Yai, Zhang Sun, and Yuchi Baolin looked at him. How could they wait? They all picked up their weapons and rushed in the direction of the teaching building. Good Lord, he dared to fight at this time. This was a good opportunity. This was an opportunity that they couldn't get even if they begged for it. When several people rushed to the field without caring about their lives, they realized that this matter seemed to be somewhat unusual. Ma Zhou and Lai Ji were relatively short and thin. At this time, they were squeezed out of the crowd and anxiously scratched their ears and cheeks. At this time, when they saw Cheng Chumo and the others rushing over with murderous intent, the two of them were stunned. They hurriedly went forward and asked, I say, seniors, what are you doing? Cheng Chumo stared at the two of them and pointed at the crowd. He asked, You still ask me? Tell me what's going on first. Which bastard dares to make trouble here? Does he want to die? Tell me who? Lao Tzu wants to tear him apart alive. Lai Ji and Ma Zhou's expression froze. They looked at several people suspiciously and then said, You guys don't know what's going on here? Nonsense. Cheng Chumo rolled up his sleeves and lifted the collar of a student who was about to bump into him. He threw him back and said, Tell me who's so bold. Seeing that the few of them were so confused, Ma Zhou and Lai Ji said in a daze, You go and ask the dean. The dean is preparing to teach inside, so these people heard the news and came here. What? When Cheng Chumo heard this, he was so shocked that the axe in his hand almost fell to the ground. You said, These people heard that the dean is here to teach, so they came here? Mother asterisk cur, isn't this a little too much? At this time, Wei Shuyu and Zhang Sun were dumbfounded. Their eyes were wide open and they hurriedly threw the weapons in their hands to the side. Then, the few of them looked at each other in confusion. Then, Du Go said carefully, Why don't we go in and listen? Chapter 1597. When they heard this, they instantly agreed. For the past few days, Zhang Feng had been busy doing something unknown. Zhang Feng had told them about these things before, but they had already returned it to Zhang Feng in their King dreams. At this time, Zhang Feng had told them not to say anything. This made them feel extremely miserable. They went to look for Ma Zhou and the others. Feng Zi had actually ordered them to keep their mouths shut. Whoever dared to say anything would be beaten up. This was unbearable. In the past few days, the water wheel had been built. However, they did not know where it went wrong. If there was not a problem here, there must be a problem somewhere else. This made them so anxious that they could not stop even if they wanted to. What was worse was that Feng Zi refused to say anything even if he died. On the other hand, their father and the people from the Ministry of Works had come to ask several times. Seeing that the time to hand over the phosphate fertilizer was almost up, if they could not get it done by then, forget about being admired by tens of thousands, they might as well be beaten 50 times first. At this time, it was obvious that this classroom was a place for physics classes. At this time, Zhang Feng could actually come. Presumably, even if he did not want to teach in front of so many people, he could not bring himself to do it, right? The few of them smiled knowingly. At this time, Lao Tzu being shameless was better than not being able to hand over the stuff and being beaten up by their father and the emperor, right? Move aside, move aside. All of you, move aside for Lao Tzu. Cheng Chumo's loud and rough voice exploded in an instant, making the students a little fearful. They instinctively moved aside to make a path. The crowd did not dare to delay in the slightest and did not dare to offend these people. Zhang Feng, who was in the classroom, also heard the voices outside the door. He knew that his arrival would attract a lot of students. After all, this was his first time teaching in a classroom. Naturally, the students would flock over. However, he did not expect that so many people would come. Moreover, these people finally could not hold it in any longer. Thinking of this, Zhang Feng also temporarily put aside the idea of preparing the lecture. He waved his hand and asked the students to open the front and back doors as well as the windows. In an instant, the students outside the door rushed into the classroom in excitement. Originally, the classroom was designed according to the classroom of the future. A classroom could accommodate 60 people without feeling crowded. In an instant, all the students in the classroom could no longer sit still. Even the old Xiaotsai and Hao Chujun were forced to stand on the podium. They didn't know whether to laugh or cry as they looked at the classroom and Ma Zhou, Cheng Chumo, and the others who were still squeezing in. Cheng Chumo, Zhang Sun, Wei Shuyu, and Yuqi Baolin valiantly rushed into the classroom. However, the wooden door, they had long disappeared without a trace. Zhang Feng couldn't bear to look at them directly. He sighed and said, "All right, don't come in. If you continue to squeeze, the house will burst." When the crowd heard this, it was no longer crowded. Seeing this, Zhang Feng picked up the chalk and wrote 2 words on the blackboard. How many? In an instant, everyone looked at these 2 words and fell into deep thought. Zhang Feng said slowly, "Everyone, do you know the meaning of these 2 words?" Everyone was silent. Zhang Feng was a little disappointed. But at this time, Ma Zhou said cautiously, "Teacher, this student seems to have seen this in the textbook before. It seems to be a kind of mathematics?" In an instant, everyone came to a sudden realization. Zhang Feng looked around and finally nodded with satisfaction. "Not bad. It seems that you have put some effort into these things." These words were said to Du Go, Cheng Chumo, and the others. At this time, the faces of these people turned red. They wanted to retreat, but they couldn't. Zhang Feng did not pay any attention to them. After all, if he didn't teach them a lesson, these people definitely wouldn't remember. At this time, seeing this, Zhang Feng said slowly, "The so-called geometry is actually the accurate data to calculate the size of an object. The way we usually know how to measure the data of an object is to use the measurement method and then give it a discount. Although this is a method, sometimes, the accuracy of a matter needs to be calculated many times before the most accurate answer can be obtained. For example, building bridges and houses are all places where these things are needed. Today, what I want to teach you is a more accurate calculation method to calculate any part of an object. At least, it can save 30 times the time." Hiss. Everyone could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Mathematics. This thing was originally amazing and extraordinary. Since the invention of mathematics, the time to calculate objects was greatly reduced and it was more convenient. Almost now, measuring land and measuring methods were gradually popularized in almost all places. In other words, the knowledge of mathematics slowly sprouted in the Tang dynasty. And more people deeply believed that at this time, only by studying could they change their status and soar to the sky. Those things, as long as they found a master and learned for a few days, they would know the knack of it. Why did they need to study? And last year, the Imperial College withdrew from the study of mathematics. But there were only 2 or 3 people who came to learn. Moreover, these people were forced to come by their families. They were just going through the motions to cover the emperor's face. Almost everyone knew about this. At this time, seeing Zhang Feng say so seriously, there was something more awesome than mathematics. How could this not make all the students not be shocked? Chapter 1598. Zhang Feng could naturally understand what these people were thinking. But his purpose at this time was to settle down these people's impetuous hearts. Only by not thinking about those exaggerated and unrealistic things could these people go further. Now they were all looking at him. What was his education level? That was a serious university. These people's education level was only equivalent to that of primary school students. If he didn't give them a good blow, they really wouldn't know how to cherish it. It was not good to bite off more than one could chew. At this time, Zhang Feng no longer paid attention to the people's surprise, but listed a simple geometric calculation on the blackboard. He pointed to the blackboard and said, "This is what you have to learn today and even in the future. In addition, I'll give you a word of advice. Before you learn how to walk, don't think about flying." Hao Chu-jun, where is the teaching aid? Teaching aid? The sudden question. Hao Chu-jun was confused. After thinking for a long time, he remembered that Zhang Feng seemed to be talking about some strange rulers that the carpenters spent many days to make. He hurriedly pulled it out from under the desk and handed it to Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng shook his head speechlessly and said, "Today, I'll teach you a simple area calculation problem." While speaking, Zhang Feng drew a square on the blackboard and then marked its length, height, and width, and then said, "Think carefully about the area calculation method of mathematics. I want it tonight. And the same for you. Whoever can calculate it before Hao Chu-jun, this month's food expenses will be covered by me. What do you want to eat? I'll pay." In an instant, all the students were shocked. They only had food coupons of 30 caddies of food every month. These food coupons were universal. Whether it was drinking in the shops at the foot of the mountain, eating meat, or even buying food, etc., they were all universal. But how could they bear to? Most of the people here were born poor. Every month, more than half of the food coupons were converted into food, and then they took it to their families. If they wanted to eat chicken, duck, or fish, they would just look at it and satisfy their cravings. Otherwise, they would directly wait until these dishes were about to spoil and buy them at the lowest price. Now that he heard Zhang Feng say that he would be rewarded with a month's worth of food stamps, wouldn't that mean that he would be able to eat the most expensive food and drink? But at this moment, Zhang Feng continued, "Let me warn you all, White Deer College allows for fair competition. It allows all competition for academic purposes. This is a good thing, but you have to recognize yourselves. You are all students now, and I am the dean. What I have experienced is something you have never experienced. Therefore, you can learn from me, but don't think that you can really become me. Biting off more than you can chew will only harm you." When everyone heard this, their hearts instantly trembled. Everyone hurriedly stood up. Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, "Everything is done one step at a time. People must have the desire to improve themselves. More importantly, White Deer College's rules clearly state that you must respect your teachers. The reason why Hao Chu-jun and the others can become your mentors is because I acknowledge them. If you are not convinced, that means you are not convinced by me, Zhang Feng. I welcome all of you to debate at any time. This is under the condition that you have reason and evidence. However, if you don't have any ability and simply don't like them, and let me see you again, White Deer College is too small, please leave." Everyone's expression changed slightly. At this moment, the old scholar couldn't help but stroke his beard and nod his head. He expressed his appreciation. After a moment of silence, everyone bowed in unison. This student will abide by the teacher's teachings. When Zhang Feng heard this, he heaved a sigh of relief. White Deer College didn't have a rule that prohibited those mischievous people from coming. On the contrary, he welcomed them very much. The arrival of these people would only widen the gap between them and stimulate the fighting spirit of the students. However, he also knew that among this batch of students, many of them were stubborn children from Chang'an City. Most of them were farmers who hadn't seen the world. What did they know? They could only be educated between a heavy hammer and a big jujube. At this moment, Zhang Feng was somewhat emotional about the time when he was beaten up by his teacher when he was in primary school. Thinking about it now, perhaps his teacher was the same when he was in school? Once he thought about the sad memories, Zhang Feng couldn't continue speaking. He waved his hand and asked Hao Chu-jun to come up and do the questions. As he asked Ma Zhou and the others to come up, he casually gave them hints and reminisced about the past. The old scholar looked at Zhang Feng with a solemn expression and the things that appeared on the blackboard. He was extremely shocked. At this moment, he looked at the blackboard, then at Zhang Feng and the rest. The old scholar prostrated himself in admiration. During this period, he, Yu Shernan, and the rest had been troubled for a long time. They hadn't been able to figure out the reason why. But now, Zhang Feng settled it with a simple sentence. At this moment, the old scholar didn't know what to say. However, he was guessing in his heart. If Zhang Feng came a few more times, or if he personally came to teach these children, wouldn't the effect be great? Chapter 1599. On the other side, Yu Qigong, Xing Yaojin, Yu Shernan, and the others finally finished looking at the blueprints of all the equipment and that magical bulletproof vest. Everyone was dumbfounded. The new armor was actually very simple. It was just a layer of fine steel wire woven into the shape of an armor. Not only could it reduce the weight, but it also made the wearer more agile. This kind of armor was divided into superior armor. The appearance of the armor was still based on the Mingguang armor. And this kind of steel wire was divided into 2 layers. A layer of cooked cowhide was mixed in to prevent the arrowheads from piercing through the armor. There was another kind. It was the bulletproof vest. This kind of armor only had a heart protection mirror, as well as knee pads, arm pads, shoulder pads, elbow pads, and other parts. The body of the armor was made of ordinary linen. This kind of thing was originally willful enough. It was enough to be inlaid on it. And the strangest thing was that there was a shirt without sleeves. This shirt was made of cowhide. Sometimes, if there was no cowhide, horse skin could be used as a substitute. This thing was made of countless small fish scale-like steel plates at the front and back. Among them, there were 2 huge square pure steel plates at the back and the front. They were as thick as a finger. In other places, there were small palm-sized cowhide bags. There were also a few thin steel plates in them. This was the armor used by the infantry and cavalry that Zhang Feng designed. This kind of armor did not affect the operation of the arms, and it could reduce his burden. It was this kind of armor that made Xing Yaojin and Yu Qigong very excited. This kind of new armor, as long as there was enough iron ore and, with the increase in the number of people manufacturing it, they dared to guarantee that it would only take a year for an army of 100,000 people to be fully equipped. And it would include that kind of spear, longbow, and other things. But, right now, there were only the original pieces that had been manufactured, because they had to rush the combat equipment on Qiuzi's side, so these armors were almost stagnant. At this moment, when they saw it, they could only look on with envy. Even at this moment, when Yu Shernan, Wei Zheng, and the others saw this thing, they were so shocked that they were speechless. It was hard for them to imagine that if all these things were equipped on a soldier, then, the kind of heavy cavalry that Zhang Feng had mentioned before, could he really succeed? At this moment, Arkanon didn't notice the looks in everyone's eyes. He was still introducing the models that they had made according to the strange things that Zhang Feng had mentioned. This is the Mitsubishi Dart, this is the Flying Tiger Claw, and this is the horse armor. As for these items, the dean instructed that we must produce at least 3 sets within 3 days. A wisp of surprise flashed past Li Yuan's eyes when he heard this, and he asked. But Arkanon picked up a modified single-handed crossbow and said, the dean said he made it for 2 brothers. Hearing this, although their eyes flashed with a hint of, as expected, they were still somewhat disappointed. Not to mention the other things, just the armor and the long spear in his hand were enough for him to make outstanding contributions in battle as long as he wasn't a fool. Moreover, he was the current crown prince, Li Chengqian, as well as Gao Kan, whose strength was unknown, but who was able to knock out Yu Qigong's 2 sons, whom he had raised since they were young. Such talents, barring any major accidents, would definitely achieve great military merits in this trip to Qiuzi. This brat really thought it through thoroughly. But you motherf **, didn't Lao Tzu treat you well? Or is it that my kid didn't treat you well? Why didn't you let him go? At this moment, not to mention Xing Yaojin and Yu Qigong, even Fang Xianling and Wei Zheng's faces showed some slight anger. Clang! At this moment, Arkanon solemnly pulled out a shining silver sword, waved it with some difficulty, and handed it to everyone. Everyone's eyes were almost blinded by the flash. The appearance of this sword was somewhat like a Mo sword, but it was slightly curved. The back of the sword had a blunt edge like a file, and the other side had a blade edge for a blood groove. The tip of the sword was somewhat similar to a Mo sword, but it seemed to have been cut in half from one side. The slightly slanted edge was sharp, and at the same time, It was more like a sharpened spear that was specially used for piercing. The hilt was made of pure iron, and seemed to be a single piece. The place where the sword was more like an extra iron chisel that was directly cut from the hilt, and stretched out as a guard. And at the edge of the sword, there was a large circle. No one knew what it was used for. The whole thing that looked like a sword and a saber looked quite strange, but everyone knew that. This thing was made for killing people. Li Yuan picked up this sword, shook it, and then asked somewhat aghast, This thing, what is its name? This is the sword that the dean made. I don't know what it is used for, but the dean hasn't seen this thing yet. When he first mentioned it, he was very hesitant, as if he didn't want to make it. Chapter 1600. Actually, back then, Zhang Feng had given Arcanon the blueprints for many types of weapons. In particular, according to the model of the 7 swords in his memory, as well as the kukri blade that was popular in the 21st century and other famous swords. There were also blueprints that were suitable for ergonomics or the model of a great treasure sword that could only be found in games. After all, he was only half-baked. There were some things that he could only say ambiguously. At this moment, this thing that looked like a sword but was not a sword was something that he had designed after considering the current situation, as well as the various types of swords and sabers, as well as the situation that was beneficial to the battlefield. This sword was not a ceremonial sword, nor was it an official sword. Instead, it was used to kill. Thus, almost all of the functions of this sword were focused on one point. That is, to kill. In Zhang Feng's mind, the most ideal users of this sword were light cavalry and heavy cavalry, as well as archers. Once they encounter a special situation, this sword would become their second killing weapon. As for the reason why he had designed a ring behind this sword, that was only half of it. There was still the other half that he had not designed. In fact, it was an iron ring that was locked onto the wrist. The iron ring was connected to a chain, and the chain was connected to this sword. The advantage of doing so was that he could completely control this sword and would not easily lose it. Even if he died, then the enemy would have to spend a lot of effort to be able to use this sword. It was not something that could be used immediately. This was Zhang Feng's original intention in designing this sword. As for the others, Zhang Feng was only thinking about the broadsword that looked as awesome as a door. If this plaything were to be created, Cheng Yaojin's dual axes were swung a few times and he was already gasping for breath like an ox. Zhang Feng believed that the door-shaped broadsword was twice as heavy as Cheng Yaojin's dual axes. Forget about what to do with this thing. Even if you were to carry it around the battlefield, you would be able to tire several people to death. If this plaything were to be used on the battlefield, at this moment, the sword that was displayed before Li Yuan and the others was something that Zhang Feng had painstakingly researched. It was a sword that could slash and stab. A sword that was suitable for the battlefield. Just like Bing Long's spear. When the 3 parts of the handle were connected together, it was a long spear, and when it was taken apart, it was a great treasure sword. This thing had a different effect in close combat and on horseback. In Zhang Feng's memory, the Tang army and the Turks were equipped with scimitars. With a single strike, they were instantly reduced to clay chickens and pottery dogs. However, these things were too time-consuming. Therefore, Zhang Feng only asked them to create some model swords first. In other words, it was a sample. At this moment, other than the fact that the tip of the sword was not fully opened, Cheng Yaojin and Yu Qigong believed that the current state of the sword was enough for it to be used in battle. That was not all. Inside the control room that Arcanon had opened, there were many weapons that had not been assembled or were in the process of being manufactured. For example, there was something that looked like a sleeve protector with a few arrowheads embedded in it. It looked cold and threatening, but that was nothing. What made them feel even more baffled was that, why is there a whip? A horse whip? Although this toy was useful for beating up bodyguards and local ruffians, could this toy be used on the battlefield? Not to mention Yu Qigong and Cheng Yaojin. At this moment, even Wei Zheng and Yu Shernan were dumbfounded. But at this moment, Arcanon cautiously closed the door. Then he said, "These are the secrets of my forging workshop. Ordinary people can't even see them. Since the dean trusts you so much, I won't say anything. However, for the next thing in the forging room, I ask you to keep your mouths shut." Li Yuan and the others were stunned. They hurriedly asked, "Is it inside?" Li Yuan instantly thought of the thing that Zhang Feng had mentioned before. Flamethrower. Although they had heard about this thing for the longest time, they had never seen it in person. At this moment, seeing Arcanon so cautious, they could not help but be a little cautious. But more than that, they were still looking forward to it. What is this thing? To put it bluntly, they had seen the power of the cannon just now. Although this was just a simple cannon barrel made when testing gunpowder, they were not fools. If it was something 10 times bigger than this, that power, it was unimaginably huge. And after showing it for so long, those weapons had been introduced. It was nothing more than some common weapons that had undergone some modifications. Forget it. They could think of this. But they had always been thinking about the flamethrower that Zhang Feng had always admired. This thing was the real deal. So at this moment, seeing Arcanon so cautious, they could not help but look forward to it even more. Seeing them like this, Arcanon reminded them again and again before slowly and solemnly opening the stone door that was the deepest in the cave, which was also the deepest from the ground. In an instant, a wave of hot and humid smell accompanied by an unpleasant smell hit their faces. Chapter 1601. At this time, what appeared in front of everyone was. It was a stone room that occupied an area much larger than any of the stone rooms above. Li Yuan secretly estimated that this place seemed to be as large as the entire forging workshop. It was hard for him to imagine that this forging workshop had only been established for a little more than a month. It was actually able to create such an appearance. Although it looked quite simple and crude, it already had everything that should be inside. There were more than a dozen forging furnaces that were slightly smaller than the ones outside, as well as a long chimney that was chiseled through the walls of the cave leading to the outside, as well as a smelting furnace in the center of the stone room. At this time, a blazing fire was burning, and on the platform at the top, the craftsmen were paying taxes on the smelting furnace. This was the reason why when everyone entered the room, they felt a trace of dampness amidst the heat wave that hit them in the face. Around the smelting furnace, craftsmen had actually carved out some forging holes. Some craftsmen were bending over and carefully hammering these things that were only as thick as a thumb. There were even some craftsmen who had placed small furnaces on the platforms. At this time, they were squatting beside the furnaces, sweating profusely as they fiddled with something. This was the first time that everyone had seen such a strange scene. At this time, they could not help but be amazed. "I say, Alkinen, what are these people doing?" Cheng Yaojin could not help but ask. Yu Qigong had personally led an army to capture them. At this time, he was standing together with Cheng Yaojin. Obviously, these people were not fools. Cheng Yaojin had been stationed in Longyu Road for many years. Naturally, his fame had already spread to all parts of the western region. At this time, when he heard Cheng Yaojin's words, Alkinen instinctively felt a trace of fear. He quickly said, "This stone room is where the secrets of forging firearms are kept. There are more than 30 kinds of components in this room, and each of them is extremely precise. Some of them are even as thin as white paper, so it is quite troublesome to make them. 5 of the people here are top locksmiths of the Tang dynasty. These people have a clear division of labor, and each of them is doing their job. Look at this." Alkinen explained in detail. Then he picked up a trigger and a linkage buckle from the forging table and said, "Although this thing is small, it's the most difficult to make among these things. It's also the most important part, just like the trigger of a strong crossbow." Arcanon explained the details one by one. The expressions of Li Yuan and the rest also changed incomparably. They were agitated, excited, and worried. What they were worried about was why Zhang Feng chose these foreigners to participate in such a confidential matter. Why didn't he choose the natives of the Tang dynasty? If something were to happen, or if these people were to secretly send such a secret item to the outer realms, he wouldn't be able to escape. Wouldn't that bring a lot of trouble to the Tang dynasty? At the thought of this, Li Yuan's expression was no longer indifferent. He took the opportunity to whisper in Yu Qigong's ear, "Go quickly. Fengzi, get it for the old man." Yu Qigong naturally knew what the old master was worried about at this time. If he didn't ask clearly about this matter, no one would be at ease. What was more, Yu Shernan, Wei Jing, and the others were here. This thing, once leaked out, it would be fatal to the Tang dynasty. Before he entered the cave, he had been thinking about the future. Yu Qigong had always thought that this cave was just SOSO. It was just a forging room carved out to save time. But only when he saw the thing here did Yu Qigong completely overturn that idea in his heart. If this thing was placed in the West, it would have been discovered long ago. Before these things could be used on the battlefield, the news would have been leaked out. At this time, he understood more why Zhang Feng first modified the Mitsubishi bayonets, the crossbows, and then the spears and so on. These things turned out to be Zhang Feng's cover for this gun. This thing was the key. As for the cannon, it was the same. Even if there were spies who could find out everything, they couldn't really find out any useful information, such as things that could be forged in this underground forging room. Especially this gun. Even if he could make it, he knew the general appearance and so on. But if he didn't have the parts drawings made by Zhang Feng, how could he make it? This was also the magical part of Zhang Feng. He almost divided these drawings into countless pieces. Each person had a drawing. In this way, almost everyone had a different secret part. Even if there were illegal people who stole one of them, it was useless. The most important thing was that Zhang Feng was waiting for them to steal it. This gun was not something else. As long as there was a problem with one part, it would be scrapped. If it was serious, it would directly explode. If someone else made this thing on the test bench with his permission, then Zhang Feng would be eager for him to make it quickly. Zhang Feng might even give him dozens of carts of gunpowder. Once he exploded the gun. Chapter 1602. On the other side, Zhang Feng had just finished explaining the importance of geometry and arithmetic, as well as the calculation techniques. Then he was invited out of the classroom by Cheng Chumo and the others who could not wait any longer. At this moment, there was only a group of people left in the classroom. They stared at the things that Zhang Feng had just said, which they had recorded word for word on a piece of scrap paper. After looking at the last problem of calculating the sum of the area of a square object, everyone fell silent. They carefully savored the mysteries of arithmetic. Previously, they had only been exposed to the simplest multiplication tables, division tables, and simple calculations such as addition and subtraction. They thought that they were familiar with the mysteries of arithmetic. However, after the lesson of the dean, they suddenly realized that they were nothing here. In any place other than the mountains, as long as they wore the uniform of White Deer College, it was like a pass. They could enter and leave Chang and the various restaurants and tea houses without queuing. Even in the tea houses, they did not need to pay. So much so that all of them felt like they were floating in the air. What was this? This was a symbol of their status. This was all the face that the dean had earned. This was the pride of everyone in White Deer College. However, after today's lesson, they finally realized that they were nothing even at this moment. The old scholar looked at the arithmetic problem on the blackboard with a solemn expression, engrossed in it. At this moment, at the side of the teaching building, Cheng Chumo and the others invited Zhang Feng here. They looked at Zhang Feng with a smile and rubbed their hands. This scared Zhang Feng so much that he thought that these guys were going to kill him to silence him. He hurriedly asked, "You guys, what's the matter?" Yes. Cheng Chumo nodded and said, "Now, the matter of this water wheel is basically settled. However, this water wheel needs to be changed almost every day. This is not right. However, we have thought of many ways. We even changed it to an iron rod or a steel rod. Although it is effective, it will not last for more than a few days. So, you took the opportunity to find me here?" Zhang Feng asked with some disdain. Although Cheng Chumo wasn't happy, he didn't dare to provoke Zhang Feng at this time. He could only pinch his nose and accept it. However, Du Go wasn't willing. He picked up his notes and argued with Zhang Feng. Du Go was famous for being a chatterbox. That terrifying mouth technique could even make people feel terrified. At the very least, Cheng Chumo and the others didn't dare to fight back. Even Li Chengqian couldn't handle it. At this moment, Du Go's attack was something that they had discussed beforehand. If Zhang Feng did not say anything, then Du Go would do it. At this moment, Du Go and Zhang Feng were in the middle of a heated argument. They tried their best to hold back their laughter. While smoking, they silently calculated the time in their hearts to see how long Zhang Feng could last. Sure enough, in the time it took to finish a meal. In the end, Zhang Feng was defeated. Brother, I give up. This water wheel is almost okay, but it has a fatal weakness, and that is the transmission device. Before Zhang Feng could finish, Du Go hurriedly asked, Feng Zi, what is this transmission device? Wei Shuyu couldn't help but ask, yeah, Feng Zi, you should be more clear. If you only say this and that, who doesn't know how to say it? This thing, even if you want me to say it, I can say it too. During this period of time, we have spent countless days and nights, and we still can't get this thing done. You just open your mouth and say this and that. Tell us how to solve it. We are going to deliver the goods tomorrow. What do you want us to do? When Zhang Feng heard this, he was angry and amused. However, at this moment, he knew that if he laughed, he would be beaten up in minutes. Zhang Feng could only sigh and say, do you still remember the lesson I taught you on the night I moved to the villa area? When he said this, their faces instantly turned red. They slowly looked around and started to talk about it. None of them dared to look Zhang Feng in the eye. No, Du Go. Du Go frowned as he flipped through the book in his hand. Then he said, Feng Zi, there seems to be some sort of misunderstanding about this playbook. Back then, I clearly remembered that you had mentioned the method of power transmission and the method of forming the hydrodynamic force. You didn't talk about the construction of the water wheel at all, right? Zhang Feng patted his forehead and looked at Du Go curiously. He leaned forward to take a look at the little book and realized that this guy was actually taking notes. Motherf asterisk Kerr. Good guy, who the hell would write a diary? This guy, he actually wrote a diary? However, at this moment, even if he wrote a diary, it didn't matter. After all, he really did talk about this matter. Zhang Feng pointed at the book and then called Chung Chumo and the others over. He said, Come, all of you, come and take a look. I don't believe that you all don't remember this thing. Motherf asterisk Kerr, now that Lao Tzu asked you to make this water wheel, don't tell me you don't want it to move. This can move, is it the power unit? In an instant, the few of them suddenly became cheerful. Chung Chumo patted his forehead excitedly and shouted, Motherf asterisk Kerr, so that's how it is. No wonder Lao Tzu didn't see this thing even after flipping through it. So it's because of this matter. Motherf asterisk Kerr, Chong Zi Motherf asterisk Kerr, you said that this thing? Lao Tzu didn't believe you. At this moment, everyone suddenly realized. Motherf asterisk Kerr, it was this guy who said that the construction of this water wheel was very complicated. It was far from a problem of power, it was a problem of some manufacturing process. If they had known that this was a scam, Motherf asterisk Kerr, they would have made it long ago. Why would they be laughed at by Feng Zi now? The few of them looked at Zhang Feng's speechless expression and then looked at Zhang Sun who was about to slip away. Everyone was angry. Du Go was so angry that his beard was blowing and his eyes were glaring. He put away the little book and shouted, Motherf asterisk Kerr, beat him up. Chapter 1603. Zhang Sun did not even know what was going on. He was pressed to the ground and hammered by someone. Among them, Wei Shuyu, Chen Chumo and the rest were all bark and no bite. Their fists were swinging loudly, but when they landed on their bodies, it was like a tickle. But this bastard Du Go, he was definitely going all out. Every punch made Zhang Sun Chong cry out in pain. The key point was that this guy was always looking for Zhang Sun Chong's soft flesh. Alright, if you continue, I'm leaving. Zhang Feng could tell. Apart from Du Go who was really angry, the rest of them were just putting on an act. He had no choice but to ask them to stop. By the time everyone stopped, Zhang Sun Chong's face had already lost its original appearance. 2 panda eyes and 2 lines of nosebleeds could not be stopped. Zhang Feng felt a headache coming on. He did not hide anything anymore. Originally, he had planned to explain the water wheel to them. After all, Zhang Feng also knew the importance of the matter. The phosphate fertilizer factory at the foot of the mountain was almost finished. He only needed to wait for this set of equipment to be installed before it could be activated. Furthermore, tomorrow was the day that the Ministry of Works would hand over the equipment. If they missed it, then there would be trouble. Zhang Feng knew that all the commoners and officials at the foot of the mountain were waiting for this toy. If they couldn't hand over the equipment tomorrow, there would inevitably be chaos. At this moment, seeing that the few of them had quieted down, Zhang Feng gestured for them to follow him to the villa area. The craftsmen making the water wheel in the villa area were still racking their brains, but as usual, they did not know where the problem was. At this moment, they saw Zhang Feng arrive. Everyone hurriedly stood up and greeted him. Zhang Feng asked them to stand up, then pointed at the water wheel and talked to the craftsmen. Among these craftsmen, there was an old man who used to work in the Ministry of Works. Because of his age and dissatisfaction with the Ministry of Works, he resigned in anger. If Zhang Feng had not found him, Zhang Feng would not have been able to find such a skilled person. However, although this person was very skilled, he was also a stubborn old man. He would argue with Zhang Feng for almost half a day about almost everything, especially when the water wheel was being built. In ancient times, especially in the early years of the Tang dynasty and before the Tang dynasty, almost all the water wheels had straight blades. However, the water wheel designed by Zhang Feng had slanted blades. The most important thing was that one of the blades was positive while the other was negative. The advantage of such staggered slanted blades was that the water wheel moved faster. The difficulty was that doing so would worsen the wear and tear of the entire water wheel. In particular, Zhang Feng had made the axle of the water wheel thinner. Under the premise of only pursuing speed, the degree of exhaustion had also increased. In addition, during this period of time, they had not been able to find the reason, so these little dukes had directly dragged him to do research every day. They had long been tortured to the point of being unable to bear the burden. At this moment, they saw Zhang Feng arrive. Only then did they heave a sigh of relief. They also repeatedly complained that they were ready to go home and retire. They did not want to suffer here anymore. This made Zhang Feng very depressed. At this time, why did these craftsmen not have the spirit of exploration? The craftsmen who had been kidnapped from the western regions were all as if injected with chicken blood when they saw the magical drawings and the magical manufacturing process. This was simply incomparable. Zhang Feng could not say anything. After all, the old master was so old. He could only helplessly say, "Old master, I know what you mean. After this water wheel is built, whether you all stay or leave will be decided separately. Now, let me tell you what's wrong with this water wheel. Look, there's actually no problem with the water wheel as a whole. The problem lies in the axle." As he spoke, Zhang Feng kicked the steel axle that was still swaying. Then he said, "You can't even fix this thing firmly. Do you think it won't be seriously damaged?" When he said this, the good craftsman frowned and said, "Sir Director, once this thing is fixed, won't it not be able to move?" Zhang Feng chuckled and said, "Do you still remember the 2 rings I brought you?" The old craftsman was stunned. He still did not remember. Do Go remembered. He hurriedly dug out 2 palm-sized steel rings from a pile of scrap metal at the side. When Zhang Feng brought them here, he said that this was the main point. However, no one knew what this thing was used for, so they did not pay much attention to it. Zhang Feng picked up the 2 round things and put them on the steel rod. Then he hammered them into the axle and said, "Now, you all have to think of a way to fix it firmly in here. After that, don't worry about it. I can guarantee that this thing can be used for half a year without a problem." Zhang Feng did not want to explain this bearing. After all, once this thing was explained, it would take a lot of time. At this time, there was no lubricant and there was no oil found. Moreover, this thing was driven by water, so there was no need for lubricant. When he said this, everyone still did not understand. However, Zhang Feng was too lazy to explain anything. He yawned leisurely and prepared to go back and have a good afternoon nap. There were too many things to do today. In addition, he was dizzy from drinking and had said a lot of things. At this moment, he was so sleepy that he could not even open his eyes. Just as Zhang Feng turned around and was about to go to sleep, suddenly he was scared out of his wits by Yu Qigong's voice. "Feng Zi, you're finally done with this thing? Then let's go. The old master wants to see you." Chapter 1604. Zhang Feng really did not want to do that. However, he did not know when old Yu and old Chen appeared behind him, so much so that he was scared out of his wits. After a long while, Zhang Feng recovered and asked in surprise, How long have you been here? Yu Qigong chuckled and said, when you arrived, we had just arrived. What is it? Without waiting for Zhang Feng to finish his question, Yu Qigong immediately took action. He grabbed Zhang Feng and said, let's go, we'll know when we get there. Zhang Feng was speechless. He struggled with all his might, but seeing that he could not break free, he could only follow the two to the workshop with a speechless expression. Cheng Chumo and the rest were dumbfounded. After exchanging glances, they looked at the Yuchi brothers and said, I say, they seem to have been in the workshop for a long time, right? The Yuchi brothers nodded seriously. Wei Shuyu immediately perked up and said, could it be that they have done something shameful in there? Their eyes lit up, but then dimmed again. What could they have done? It was nothing more than finding something good. At this moment, Du Go said faintly, have you forgotten that Li Gan will be going to Chiotzi City in 2 days? What do you think they are doing here at this time? Also, don't you want to go and see what that loud noise was just now? Hearing that, instantly, the few of them became interested and hurriedly followed. Let's go, let's follow Dad and take a look. After Zhang Feng and the rest led Chen Chumo and the rest into the cave of the workshop, Chen Chumo and the rest were dazzled, as if they were Granny Lu who had entered the Grandview Garden. They looked here and there, it was simply too much for their eyes to take in. In the end, the few of them locked their gazes on the shining silver sword in Wei Zhang's hand. That sword? Damn, it's a little cool. They just did not know how powerful this thing was. The few of them waited. After entering the cave on the next floor, they saw a dazzling array of weapons displayed in the cave. In an instant, they couldn't help but stop in their tracks. Fengdi, do we brothers have a share in them? Their gazes were already attracted by the strange-looking weapons that Yu Qigong and the others had seen earlier. When Zhang Feng saw this, he instantly became smug, especially when he saw Yu Qigong's pleading gaze. He slapped Yu Qigong's hand away and said, you want it? How could they not want it? They nodded in agreement. At this moment, Zhang Feng's heart was filled with joy. He had been in a bad mood the entire journey when Yu Qigong clamped down on him. Now that he had the chance to take revenge, he said, take a look. These are all low-class items. The real good stuff is at the bottom. The few people who were choosing their weapons were stunned when they heard this. With Yu Qigong and Cheng Yaojin's confirmation, the few of them had a burning look in their eyes. However, Yu Qigong still picked up the whip from the pile of weapons and said, Feng Zi, I can tolerate the other items, but tell me, what is this whip for? This thing can kill people? Zhang Feng looked at Yu Qigong as though he was looking at an idiot. Sun Ernyang can kill people with a kitchen knife. What's more, she gave you a chopstick, an axe, and a hoe. Tell me, are these weapons? Yu Qigong was stunned. Zhang Feng was right. These things could really kill people. But this whip, no matter how he looked at it, it did not look like it could kill people. Zhang Feng could not be bothered to explain. He asked Chen Chumo to take the whip and swing it at a pole not far away. Chen Chumo did not believe it, but he still did as he was told. However, the next moment when the whip wrapped around the pole, it made a metallic sound. Everyone was stunned. Chen Chumo pulled back the whip, and the steel pipe was pulled back as well. He also saw that the whip had scales as dense as snake scales. What was even more frightening was that there were barbs between the scales. At this time, there were also scratches left on the steel pipe that had been entangled with it. At that moment, everyone could not help but break out in a cold sweat. Damn it, this thing. If it appeared on the battlefield, it would definitely cause trouble if they were caught off guard. Good weapon. Cheng Yaojin could not help but exclaim. Zhang Feng said smugly, of course. The main material of this whip is made of sheep tendons, cow tendons, and some other special materials. It is then made into a net with steel wires. The scales on the net are pieced together by small steel shavings the size of chopsticks. This thing may not look like much, but once it wraps around you, even the head of a black bear can be pulled off by it. That depends on whether you have the strength to do so. Hiss. Even Yu Qigong and Cheng Yaojin couldn't help but suck in a cold breath when they heard this. Zhang Feng waved his hand and urged, let's go. There's nothing good here. Let's go down and see where the essence of this forge is. It's also the most precious thing. However, at that moment, Du Go said in a trembling voice. Feng Zi. Zhang Feng was stunned and asked, "What?" "I want this whip." Zhang Feng felt a chill run down his spine. This guy was already a bad guy. If he gave this thing to him, although it suited his temperament, it would be terrible if something happened. Zhang Feng shook his head repeatedly. No, this doesn't suit you." Du Go ignored Zhang Feng and took the whip from Qin Chimo's hand and wrapped it around his belt. Zhang Feng could not help but give him a thumbs up. "You're King awesome." Lao Tzu is impressed. Chapter 1605. Zhang Feng didn't expect that a person could be so shameless when he became shameless. But today he saw it for himself. This Du Dabing really didn't talk about martial ethics. But there was no other way. He also had to have something to defend himself. This whip was undoubtedly the most suitable for him. If he was given a knife, would he be able to use it? What kind of moves would he know? But this whip was different. There was no need for any moves. All he needed to do was to dance, and that would be enough. This was very in line with Du Go's temperament. Zhang Feng stared at Qin Chimo and the others. Seeing that they didn't want to imitate Du Go, he stopped. "Let's go. The old man is probably waiting anxiously," Yu Qigong said somewhat gloomily. Hearing this, the few of them became well-behaved. The few of them were even more curious about what else was down there. When they all entered the cave where the guns were made, everyone's eyes were fixed on what they saw. At the corner of the wall, there were steel pipes for guns. In the middle, there was a furnace as big as a central room. At this moment, it was surrounded by people knocking on it. Alkinen, Li Yuan, and the others also saw the people who just came in. Alkinen hurried forward and bowed. "Sir Dean, I've explained the general situation here and the things produced here clearly to you." Zhang Feng nodded and let Alkinen do his own thing. Then he looked at Li Yuan and asked, "Old man, are you satisfied?" "Satisfied. Very satisfied." Zhang Feng nodded. "Then let's talk about the problem of profit now." Li Yuan was stunned. He suddenly understood and nodded with a smile. He thought that Zhang Feng would say something else. How would he know that this guy was actually talking about this matter? Perhaps he did not have a lot of other things, but because of the appearance of the cooperative, as well as the scamming of so much gold and silver from Tibet and the other countries, the current imperial treasury was already incomparably full. Thus, a bit of money was not a problem for Li Yuan. Besides, once these weapons fell into his hands, how much money could he not have? Even if Zhang Feng wanted to choose a state capital, Li Yuan would dare to give it away. He believed that Li Shimin would also give it away. After all, it was this godforsaken Xishan. After being tormented by Zhang Feng for less than 3 months, it had become like this. Moreover, the two markets in Chang and city combined were not as profitable as this one, and it was not as lively as this one. What if it was a state capital? If Qiuzi was given to Zhang Feng, would Zhang Feng be able to turn Qiuzi into the most prosperous and most stable city in the west of the Tang dynasty in less than a year? This was also what Li Shimin wanted to see. However, the state capital, they wanted to, but they were afraid that the officials in the imperial court would be dissatisfied, and this brat would directly discover their identities. Therefore, they could only wait for Zhang Feng to speak. At this time, giving Qiuzi City's commerce to Zhang Feng was almost the same as giving Qiuzi City's lifeline to Zhang Feng. In other words, Qiuzi City belonged to Zhang Feng. However, this was just not a clear statement. Hearing this, Zhang Feng thought for a moment and said, "I'll leave the blueprints of these weapons and equipment, and these craftsmen to you. These people are all treasures. You have to be careful. These people, especially Arcanon and Mokido, are treasures among talents. I'll still control the forge on the mountain, but it's only used to invent some new things. As for the mass production, I'll leave it to you. Moreover, I'm not sure about the cost of these weapons. You can discuss the specifics among yourselves. I only want half of the profits. What do you think?" Li Yuan was silent. Wei Zheng, Fang Xianling, Yu Shinan, Yu Qigong, and the others were silent. They were still worried whether Zhang Feng would take the opportunity to ask for an exorbitant price, but now it seemed that they were measuring the heart of a gentleman with their own mean measure. Zhang Feng did not think so much at all. At this time, when they heard Zhang Feng say such words, they almost vomited blood. This motherf asterisk really only cared about money. Li Yuan was also stunned. After a moment, his expression changed and he asked somewhat solemnly, "This thing, are you not going to care about it anymore in the future?" Zhang Feng nodded. "More or less. I don't have much time to worry about so much. The matter of the phosphate fertilizer has not been settled yet. I have to deal with it first. Besides, as long as nothing goes wrong in this battle against Xiaozi, it will definitely succeed. What's there to worry about? My current experience is to set up this laboratory. When Li Gan and the others return from the battlefield, my laboratory will officially start." Li Yuan nodded, his eyes flashing. In his opinion, Zhang Feng's talent in military affairs was more terrifying than anything else. If this kid really put his heart and soul into one thing, then his achievements could not be limited. At this time, seeing this, the expressions of Yu Shernan and the others recovered slightly. This was what they wanted. This was what they wanted to see the most. Zhang Feng was indeed a talent, but what they wanted to see the most was that Zhang Feng could become a person who benefited one side, and not an accomplice who caused a massacre. This was not good for Zhang Feng. It was also not good for the position of the entire academy. After all, Zhang Feng was the soul of this academy. Once Zhang Feng chose a path, it was destined to make the students of the entire academy the same. Li Yuan did not expect Zhang Feng to be like this. He asked tentatively, "Now that these things have almost been manufactured, what else are you going to do?" Chapter 1606. Li Yuan asked what almost everyone wanted to ask. But the timing was not right before, so everyone did not ask. Now that the topic had reached this point, naturally everyone wanted to hear it, especially Yu Shernan and the others. They knew that the old scholar had asked Zhang Feng to go, and they also discussed it before letting the old scholar go to Zhang Feng for a heart-to-heart talk. After all, the relationship between the old scholar and Zhang Feng, in the eyes of outsiders, was simply like that of a new father and son. At this time, seeing that Zhang Feng was asked about this matter, several people were also somewhat expectant. After all, just now, Zhang Feng had already handed over the matter of these firearms to the retired emperor. At this time, when he opened the laboratory again, several people were also very confused, not knowing what Zhang Feng wanted to do. However, Zhang Feng shook his head at this time and said, "I haven't thought about this matter for the time being, but one thing is certain, it is dynamics." Dynamics? Several people were dumbfounded. Yu Qigong scratched the beard on his chin and asked, "Is it the kind of hydrodynamics that you mentioned?" Zhang Feng waved his hand and said speechlessly, "We can't keep talking here, right? Don't you feel hot?" Hearing this, only then did everyone come to their senses and hurriedly went out of the cave with Zhang Feng. Once out of the cave, Alkinen had already placed a table of sumptuous wine and dishes on the spacious flat ground outside. Seeing this, Li Yuan gave a thumbs up. Now Zhang Feng only lacked 3 bowls of wine. Once these 3 bowls of wine were in his stomach, Zhang Feng would not be him anymore. And on the shelf next to the wine table at this time were the various samples of the produced weapons that they saw just now. At this time, Zhang Feng was also a little surprised. However, when he saw that everyone in the smelting workshop came out and looked at everyone with burning eyes, it seemed that it was very obvious that they wanted to wait for Zhang Feng's inspection. Zhang Feng was also not polite. They began to comment one by one. When Zhang Feng picked up the sword and waved it twice, Yu Qigong excitedly asked, "Feng, Z, you said that these things were given to the patriarch. It's not too much to ask for one now, right?" Zhang Feng stared blankly. He used the knife to point at Li Yuan and chuckled. "You'll have to ask the old man about this. These things are all his." Hearing this, Yu Qigong withered. Looking at the whip on Dugo's waist, he wished he could slap himself a few times. Just now, if he had been a little thick-skinned, he would have gotten nothing. However, there was no chance now. The eyes of Qing Yaojin and Chung Chumo darkened. How could Li Yuan not see their appearances? He snorted coldly with mild anger on his face. In an instant, these people became well-behaved. This was still under the situation of not knowing their identities. If they knew their identities in the future, wouldn't that brat Zhang Feng make fun of them? A dignified general was actually moaning and groaning here for a little bit of foreign objects. What a scandal! Before the Battle of Chiotzi is over, no one is allowed to have these weapons. These are things that the imperial court wants. I'm afraid you don't want your heads anymore? Li Yuan's words contained a trace of threat, and within these words, everyone could even faintly smell a trace of the retired emperor's majesty. They couldn't help but tremble all over, and they hurriedly bowed. We understand. Hearing that, only then did Li Yuan slowly nod his head. If you want these things, go and ask Feng Zi. After all, these things will be brought down the mountain in the future. The old man does not care about what happens on the mountain, and neither can the imperial court. As long as you don't take them out to show off, there won't be any problem if nothing happens. Li Yuan's words instantly let everyone see a glimmer of hope. After all, these things were Zhang Feng's. Now, other than the emperor and the retired emperor, the only one who could use these things was Zhang Feng. At this time, Zhang Sun and Wei Shuyu both looked at the long spear at the same time. They were so envious that their eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Cheng Yaojin was stunned for a long time. In the end, he only reacted when Cheng Yaojin kicked his knee. He looked over and saw that Cheng Yaojin was talking with Wei Zheng as if nothing had happened. At this time, he saw Zhang Sun and Wei Shiyu's eyes, then looked at the Fang, Ai and Yuchi brothers who were circling around the Dugo. His eyes rolled and he hurriedly poured a big bowl of wine. He patted Zhang Feng's shoulder and said, Feng Zi, you too, let's drink? Zhang Feng was about to fall asleep at this time. At this time, seeing such a big bowl of wine, how could he not know what Cheng Chumo was thinking? His eyelids jumped and said, drinking wine is okay, but there needs to be a way, right? This, Cheng Chumo was stunned and scratched his head. After a moment, he suddenly said, didn't you help us a lot today? You solved the biggest problem of the water wheel. Just for this, we have to drink a bowl. At this time, Wei Shuyu and the others also came back to their senses. They hurriedly picked up the wine bowl and imitated Cheng Chumo. They picked up the bowl and wanted to compete with Zhang Feng. At this time, Zhang Feng's scalp instantly went numb. If he drank this, wouldn't he kick the bucket? This was a pure grain wine with 45% alcohol content. If he really drank it, wouldn't it be a big problem? At this time, Li Yuan also advised with a smile, Feng Zi, it's rare that they have good intentions and you drank it? Zhang Feng was instantly speechless. He wished he could slap his own mouth a few times. This matter, how did it become like this? Chapter 1607. He couldn't drink the wine at this time. If he drank it, it would really kill him. Zhang Feng wouldn't dare to drink it even if he died. He could only wave his hand and say, I'm not good at drinking, I'm not good at drinking. By the way, don't you want weapons? Tell me when I'm free, I'll make it for you personally, okay? Hearing that, even Yuchi Gong's eyes couldn't help but light up. Seeing that the two Yuchi brothers were a little dull, he was so angry that he directly kicked each of them. In an instant, the two staggered and fell into Zhang Feng's arms. It scared Zhang Feng. At this time, how could Zhang Feng not know that old Yu was anxious? He was a little speechless. Okay, I'll agree to this. It's rare to be happy today. What do you want? I'll get it for you. Ha, that's what I call a brother. Yuchi Gong laughed loudly and said, Good brother, I don't want anything else. I just want the spear. Double the weight and make one for me. As for my two brats, you can do as you see fit. Ha. Zhang Feng had a headache. This spear was now 32 caddies and 7 tails. So, you still think it's light? Although he was speechless, looking at the tens of thousands of wine in front of him, Zhang Feng still gritted his teeth and agreed. Anyway, this thing, as long as the grinding tool came out, it would be a piece of cake. Say it, old Chen, what do you want? Cheng Yaojin glanced at Li Yuan, then looked at Wei Zheng and the others. Seeing that they didn't speak, he said, I want a big axe. Zhang Feng was confused. He asked, What do you want an axe for? Chopping firewood? Yuchi Gong couldn't help but burst out laughing. Cheng Yaojin was so angry that he wanted to beat him. But he still said seriously, I admire General Cheng Yaojin, so I want to get an axe to play with. But This was a reason. Zhang Feng nodded. Zhang Feng naturally admired Xing Yaojin, so it was natural for him to have fans. But history had different opinions about Xing Yaojin. Furthermore, this battle axe had existed for thousands of years and had evolved into various models. At this moment, he couldn't help but ask, then, is this axe a double-sided axe or a single-sided axe? Is it a long-handled axe or a single-handed axe? Xing Yaojin stroked his beard and said, anything is fine. Haha, anything is fine. Look at my body, you should know what style I like. Zhang Feng was speechless. But this was for the best. Without a specific form, it would be much easier to operate. After that, Zhang Feng asked Wei Shuyu a few more questions. Wei Shuyu, Cheng Chumo, and Zhang Sun also talked about how Zhang Feng wanted to train them to become the ultimate soldier. Zhang Feng had no choice but to promise them that he would give them good armor and equipment from head to toe on another day. What Zhang Feng couldn't figure out the most was that Wei Zheng and the others actually came up and asked for weapons and bulletproof vests. This made Zhang Feng a little suspicious. Were these guys going to take these good things out and sell them on the black market? But since they were bragging, Zhang Feng could only bite the bullet and agree. Only then did everyone start drinking with a smile. Seeing this, Zhang Feng hurriedly got up and left. If he didn't leave now, he would probably be emptied out. No one stopped him this time. They all persuaded Zhang Feng to quickly go back and rest. This made Zhang Feng once again feel emotional about the fickleness of human nature. Once Zhang Feng left, the faces of Li Yuan and the others instantly changed. A good wine party instantly became heavy. Li Yuan put down his wine cup and said in a heavy voice, if there is any news about what happened here today, I will definitely not let any of you off. Do you understand? In an instant, everyone's expression changed. They hurriedly got up and bowed, but were rejected by Li Yuan. Everyone understood this, especially Wei Zheng, Fang Xianling, Yu Qigong, and Xing Yaojin. At this time, the war was already imminent, and it was also the time when the secret agents of both sides were moving the most closely. At this time, Li Yuan and Li Shimin were wondering whether Shao Mountain's secret had been sent to Qiuzi, which made Tuli so difficult. Or maybe it was because of this Ho Junji matter. But the best way to deal with this matter was to erase all information here. Today, Li Yuan thought that he would have to spend a lot of effort to persuade Zhang Feng to give up the production of these weapons and equipment. But he didn't expect that Zhang Feng was born in the year of the dog. His sense of danger was always so sensitive. He didn't expect that he would actually agree. This made Li Yuan somewhat puzzled. At the same time, he also wanted to know what the old scholar said to Zhang Feng just now. But this was not important. What was important was that at this time, the matter had already happened, and these people had coaxed and pestered Zhang Feng to get so many things. Although he would definitely not give them to them for the time being, they would definitely get into their hands. These guys, none of them were easy to deal with. When they were drunk and pretended to be cool, once that thing was leaked, it would be an irreparable blow to the Tang dynasty. That was why Li Yuan was so cautious. But at this time, the more Li Yuan thought about it, the more he felt that this matter was too serious. He hurriedly got up, looked at everyone and said, let's go back. Chapter 1608. Dong, dong, dong. The next morning, the morning bell rang. In an instant, Chang and city, which had been silent for the whole night, became lively again. The Ministry of Works was the most active. When the city gate opened, more than 100 people from the Ministry of Works and more than 50 large carts drove out of Chang and city. Those who knew about this knew that they were going to White Deer College in Shao Mountain to get something. And it was something important for the phosphate fertilizer factory. So early in the morning, the commoners didn't eat breakfast. Instead, they held their bowls and squatted at the door to watch the show. In the past, those who went out to walk their birds and dogs were nowhere to be seen. Everyone was huddled in a corner, watching the carriages leave the city. Outside the Tonghua Gate. At this moment, the moment the city gates opened, the sound of firecrackers louder than the morning bell rang through Chang and city. Everyone knew that today's big event was that the phosphate fertilizer factory was going to open. This also meant that this year's grain harvest was going to be bumper. This was the most important thing for every citizen. It was also the most exciting thing for them. Although they hadn't used the phosphate fertilizer yet, the people who got the malt by chance last time all carefully planted it in their homes like it was a treasure. Every morning and evening, they would go to see it. Under everyone's expectant gazes, this wheat sprout grew even more sturdy. In just a few days, it was already as long as a finger. The most important thing was that it was sturdy. It was as fat as the tip of a chopstick. How could the people not go crazy? The malt sprout had never disappeared in Chang'an City. Every day after dinner, people would talk about it. This was the most exciting thing for them. And today, the phosphate fertilizer factory was finally going to officially open. How could the people of Chang'an City not go crazy? Outside the Tonghua Gate. When the gate opened, a large number of people swarmed out. In such an anxious wait, 2 hours later, the ministers from the Ministry of Works, the Ministry of Appointments, the Ministry of Rights, the Ministry of Agriculture, and the other ministers who had just finished the morning meeting arrived one after another. In the small town outside Chang'an City, no one knocked on Zheng Tufu's door anymore. At this time, the sky was only slightly bright. Almost everyone was at home feeding the pigs and carrying bags of pig feed in preparation for the day's sale. When he heard someone knocking on the door, Zheng Tufu was stunned for a moment before he hurriedly opened the door. Zheng Tufu was stunned when he saw the person at the door. The person who came was none other than Niu Weili, the old master of Chang'an County. Niu Weili went straight to the point and asked, "Old Jing, Lao Li and the others asked me to ask you if you're selling this big fat pig? Today, Fengzi's phosphate fertilizer factory is operating. Lao Li and the others are preparing a banquet for everyone. Your pig is the staple food. You're saying that Fengzi did this?" Zheng Tufu naturally knew about the phosphate fertilizer factory. He also knew about what happened outside Tonghua Gate, but he never saw Zhang Feng's shadow. After asking around, he found out that these things were made by Lao Li and the others and not Zhang Feng. But now that he heard it, Zheng Tufu was a little surprised. Niu Weili's expression was a little strange when he heard that. "You're saying that this thing caused such a big commotion in Chang'an City. Who would dare to do this without Fengzi's approval?" When he said that, Zheng Tufu slapped his forehead in agitation and said, "We're not selling this pig." Niu Weili was anxious when he heard that. This was what Old Shen had personally told him last night. If he didn't do this well, he might be in trouble. Because Old Shen had also sent a letter from the censorate. "This, brother, Old Zheng, big brother Zheng, this is not up for discussion. This, just name a price. How much are you selling it for?" Zheng Tufu still shook his head. "Not selling." Niu Weili was furious. He rolled up his sleeves and shouted, "Hey, you idiot, this is an order from the higher-ups. They insisted on naming your pig. Do you know what this means?" "This means?" Before he could finish, Zheng Tufu's words almost choked him to death. Zheng Tufu said leisurely, "This pig is not for sale. In my courtyard, there are 15 big fat pigs of about 200 caddies. Just tell me how many you want. Do you want me to slaughter them for you here, or drag them to the phosphate fertilizer factory? I'll give them to you, but if you pay, Lao Tzu won't sell even a strand of pig hair." Niu Weili was stunned. He couldn't wrap his head around it. He asked in a daze, "What do you mean by this?" Zheng Tufu waved his hand and chuckled. "Look at me. If it weren't for Fengzi, Zheng Tufu would still be a butcher. All of this is thanks to Feng's, especially these pigs. If it weren't for Fengzi's idea, if it weren't for him giving me a way to make money, do you think I would dare to dream of such a good job in my entire life?" Niu Weili smacked his lips and didn't know what to say. He knew about this. After all, he was also a beneficiary back then. If it weren't for Zhang Feng, where would he have a few hundred mu of fertile land now? Where would he have those mansions in Chang'an City? Even if he worked as a county magistrate his whole life, he wouldn't be able to get it. Chapter 1609. Early in the morning. The people of Tonghui Lane were in an uproar. Early in the morning, the old village chief put on a new soapy robe that he had not worn for a long time. He stood on the street in high spirits, leaning on his walking stick and shouting. Beside him, Ma Xinliang was beating the gongs and drums with all his might. At this moment, the old village chief seemed to be 10 years younger. His back was not hunched and his eyes were not blurry. At this moment, he was already surrounded by a group of Chang and merchants. At this moment, the old village chief felt that in his 70s, Mr. Bosher had said that people were past their prime. But at this moment he suddenly felt that life had just begun. It was exceptionally wonderful. At this moment he had entered the peak of his life. Because, today, the big banquet at the phosphate fertilizer factory at the foot of Longsho Mountain was unexpectedly held by the people of Tonghui Lane. What was this? This was the emperor's favor. This was the emperor's favor to Tonghui Lane. This was a rare opportunity. If it was done well, then everyone in Tonghui Lane would become superior. They would no longer be lowly slaves. However, today, the old village chief knew early in the morning that the emperor would not come to the banquet at the phosphate fertilizer factory. That lazy Feng Zi would not come either. After all, he was still sleeping at that time. When he thought of this, the old village chief was a little angry. However, what made him tremble with fear was that although the emperor would not come today, the people who came today were either rich or noble. There were also a large number of merchants and foreign businessmen from various prefectures. And today's staple food was a pig banquet that was held by the people of Tonghui Lane, pork, although this thing, after going through Zhang Feng's hands, was no longer the smelly and disgusting thing it was before. However, the reputation of this pork was not very good. In such an important occasion, the emperor actually ordered that they must eat pork. This made the old village chief especially cautious. If something went wrong, he would be. Don't say that I'm famous. If I don't get my head chopped off, then I'll thank the heavens. When he thought of this, the old village chief became even more anxious. Leaning on his walking stick, he shouted at Zhu Zi, who was shrinking his neck and rubbing his sleepy eyes. Zhu Zi, where are your parents? Are you still sleeping? Zhu Zi was shocked by the old village chief's words and almost didn't recognize that the person wearing a black gown was actually the old village chief. He muttered in shock, "You are the old village chief? How did you become younger?" Even though the old village chief's heart was as sweet as honey, he still shook his walking stick in mild anger and asked, "Where are your parents?" Only then did Zhu Zi react. He pointed in the direction of the tavern and said, "My father and mother are in the tavern. They said that if a big shot comes today, The old village chief's expression became anxious when he heard that and said, "Still packing up for what? What time is it now? Tell your parents to go to Chang and hotel and invite a chef, especially the braised ingredients. Don't forget." Zhu Zi shrank back, cheered, and ran away. The old village chief was so anxious that he ran around in circles. He sorted out the matter again and saw that the people of Tonghui Lane had all gone in the direction of Tonghui Gate. He still felt uneasy and was willing to spend money. He hired a carriage and hurriedly rushed to Xiao Mountain. A moment later, the old village chief and Ma Xinliang appeared at the door of Zhang Feng's villa. He raised his walking stick and was about to knock on the door when Ma Xinliang hurriedly stopped him. "Old village chief, look at the time. If we knock on the door at this time, we will have to knock for 2 hours." The old village chief's expression also froze. He just remembered that Zhang Feng had a temper when he woke up. Once he lost his temper, let alone asking questions, he could do anything. However, he still felt unsafe if he didn't ask Zhang Feng about this matter. In the end, he waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about it. This old man knows that kids temper very well. It won't be a big deal." As he spoke, the old village chief began his long journey of knocking on the door. After waiting for a full hour, little Cui went downstairs and opened the door in a daze. Before she could get angry, she saw that it was the old village chief and hurriedly asked, "Old village chief, why are you knocking on the door so early? The young master hasn't woken up yet." The old village chief glared at little Cui. When he turned around, he found that Ma Xinliang had already run away without him knowing. The old village chief was so angry that he cursed in his heart. Then he said, "The phosphate fertilizer factory started work today. The factory is holding a big banquet today. Old man is here to ask if Feng Zi wants to go." While he was talking, the unwilling Zhang Feng was pushed downstairs by Jingshu. "I say, old village chief, this is such a trivial matter. Do you have to wake me up before the sun has even risen? Isn't it just a big banquet?" You can just do it. When the village chief saw Zhang Feng come downstairs, he hurriedly pulled Zhang Feng to the side and said, "Feng Zi, I didn't mean to wake you up. Look, this is a big matter. Last night, the Ministry of Works personally sent a letter saying that the emperor personally gave the order for the old workers of Tong Hui Fong to organize the banquet." Zhang Feng yawned and leaned against the wall in a daze. He lit a cigarette and said, "This is just a small matter. You can do it." The old village chief hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Logically speaking, it's really no problem to leave this matter to us. But the problem is that the emperor specifically said that he wants to have a pig banquet. You know how this pork is. Without your braising ingredients, it's nothing. Besides the nobles from the imperial palace, there's also a large number of famous clans from the various prefectures, as well as those merchants and envoys from outside the realm. If something goes wrong, won't we lose our reputation?" Before Zhang Feng could finish his yawn, he asked, "You said, this is some kind of pork? I remember that there was no more pork there, right? This pig banquet?" Chapter 16:10. Zhang Feng finally woke up from his drowsiness. Pigs, there were not many left on the deserted mountain. Even in Tonghui Square, not many people had pigs. Even if they started buying last night, they would not be able to buy such a large quantity. The most important thing was, Zhang Feng had already expected that this matter would attract countless merchants, as well as foreign merchants. What was this? This was the result that Zhang Feng wanted. But at this time, was the emperor's head kicked by a donkey? Did he want to have a pig feast? Although pork was recognized by almost everyone in Chang, and it was all based on his reputation. What about other people in Chang? What did these people know? If something were to go wrong, then we might not even be able to keep our heads today. Not to mention anything else. Seeing that the old village chief was hesitating, Zhang Feng narrowed his eyes and asked, "Old village chief, don't tell me that you haven't settled the pig matter yet?" The old village chief shook his head and said, "The pig matter is settled. The key problem now is that this is a phosphate fertilizer factory. This is the first time in our Tang dynasty that something like this has happened in hundreds of years. If we mess it up, won't we regret it to death?" Wait. Zhang Feng stopped the old village chief and asked, "This pig, it's Zheng Tufu's?" Zhang Feng's eyes widened when he heard this. "What? You're saying that these pigs are Zheng Tufu's?" The old village chief looked at Zhang Feng in surprise and said, "So, you forgot about this matter?" Zhang Feng's face stiffened. He had not only forgotten about this matter. It was as if he had completely forgotten about it. If the old village chief had not mentioned it, he would have really forgotten about this matter. At this time, he remembered that it was indeed him who had asked Zheng Tufu and Ma Zhou to go down the mountain to do a side business, which was to push this breed of pig out for him. It seemed to have been 2 or 3 months. Logically speaking, this pig should have been out of commission. But the strange thing was that he did not receive any news about this matter. Instead, the emperor heard about it. What he did was simply, at this time, the old village chief said earnestly, "Feng Zi, you are the head of the family and the head of the hospital. Originally, you have the final say in these matters. However, you have a large family business and are also careless. If we don't help you a little, who knows if those black-hearted people will give you." Zhang Feng felt a headache as he listened to the old village chief's endless chatter. Zhang Feng remembered that he hadn't heard this kind of nagging for a long time. Ever since he went to university, he rarely heard it. At this moment, Zhang Feng felt that it was somewhat familiar and also somewhat heartwarming. This is what a family should be like, right? But there was no going back. The old village chief continued, "Originally, if you don't like listening to this old man's nagging, you can just say it. We won't talk anymore." Zhang Feng grabbed the old village chief and invited him to sit down in the central room. Then he glared at little Cui and said, "Don't you have any eyesight? Hurry up and serve the old village chief some tea." Little Cui pouted her lips so hard that one could hang a pot on it. The old village chief was flattered and waved his hand. "No, no, no. That Feng Zi, let's not talk about this. Let's talk about business. The people who came this time are all nobles and officials. There are even nobles from the imperial palace. These people are all people who can control our life and death with a stomp of their feet. Although you are the dean now, we still have to make friends with these people, right? So, no matter what the reason is, we have to properly talk about this matter today. If something goes wrong today, it will be a big deal. We will lose face in front of the foreign barbarians. This is not good for our business. This pork isn't anything good to begin with. If something goes wrong, or if it isn't handled properly, logically speaking, this meat needs to be marinated for an entire night before the smell can be absorbed and the stench can be removed. However, there isn't enough time now, so I'm still a little worried about this pork. When Zhang Feng heard this, he finally understood what the old village chief was worried about. He was worried that the smell of the pork would provoke public anger. Zhang Feng smiled faintly. After comforting the old village chief, he said word by word, "Old village chief, what you said is not without reason. This banquet will have a great impact on the reputation of our academy and our business in the future. The emperor allowed us to host this time, which means that the emperor trusts us." When the old village chief heard this, his expression became even more anxious. Zhang Feng hurriedly waved his hand and calmed the old village chief. "Don't be anxious. Let me finish." Zhang Feng smacked his lips and said, "Do you still remember those craftsmen I found?" When he said this, the old village chief instantly remembered that when Zhang Feng really did let Lao Li's son go to the imperial palace to find an old eunuch called Old Gao. Now, if anyone dared to call him Eunuch Gao, that old fellow would fight with his life. But later, Old Gao lived in the gray house. That was the first house on the mountain. After that, the braised meat and food factory appeared. Then, the pigs on the mountain disappeared. Even Zheng Tufu's entire family had disappeared. Could it be, did they go out to cause trouble? Without waiting for him to ask, Zhang Feng continued, "Don't worry about this for now. In short, just remember this. For this banquet, just do as you normally do. Also, there won't be any fishy smell. In short, as long as this banquet is done well, the old and young of Tong Hui Fong will be able to earn a lot of money." Earn a lot of money. At this moment, this was the only thing left in the old village chief's mind. He did not think that Zhang Feng would actually say this. At this moment, even if he had a stomach full of worries and words, he was shocked by these 3 words and swallowed them back down. His face that was full of worries instantly turned from worry to joy. Suddenly, it became a face full of excitement and joy. Then this old man will go back to work. You continue. When this old man returns, this old man will personally host the banquet for the young master. As he spoke, the old village chief ignored Zhang Feng's ugly face and ran away. Chapter 16:11. He didn't ask Zhang Feng for details. There was no need to ask. When it came to making money, they were all younger brothers. In short, Zhang Feng was right. If Feng Zi said that they could make money, then they would definitely make money. In terms of making money and doing business, the old village chief admired him very much. Because at this moment, the smile on Ma Xinliang's face, which was full of booklets, didn't disappear at all. When the two of them hurriedly got into the carriage and rushed all the way into Chang'an, the old village chief slapped his forehead and said, I have to hurry to Zheng Tufu's place to take a look. If something happens to this kid..." "No, Shama, let's go to Zheng Tufu's place to help." Ma Xinliang was dumbfounded. Just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted by the old village chief's nagging. He said, "No, we have to invite a few more people. Let's go together." "Alright, Shama, do you know where Zheng Tufu is?" About the banquet. In fact, Zhang Feng understood that this was because of the emperor's property. More importantly, it was because of the arms business. Yesterday, he just handed the matter over to Lao Li and the others. Last night, an imperial edict came and handed over the banquet to them. What did this mean? This meant that the emperor didn't want to owe him a favor. This made Zhang Feng very depressed. Was it so difficult for Lao Tzu to make him owe him a favor? However, it was useless to think too much at this time. Who was the emperor? How could that brain of his not know Zhang Feng's plan? Otherwise, wouldn't it be great to directly hand over an imperial edict to a first-rank official? However, just as Zhang Feng had guessed, the emperor was so smart that he would not see him before he solved the problem of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. Just as the old man and Yushernan said, the higher one stood, the harder one fell. This is His Majesty protecting us from being noticed by others. He's protecting us. Zhang Feng didn't know whether he should thank Huang or curse this fatuous ruler for being blind. However, Zhang Feng only dared to think about these things in his heart. Even if he was given 100 guts, he wouldn't dare to do so. Feng Zi, why don't we join in the fun? Just take it as a farewell for me? At this moment, Li Qingxian's voice sounded from outside the door. Li Qingxian was still wearing a pure white robe. Although the weather wasn't hot, there was still a trace of coldness in the early morning. However, he was still waving his fan pretentiously. Little Cui, who was standing at the door, was mesmerized by him. Zhang Feng was so angry that he pulled little Cui's braid and said, "Wipe your saliva." Hearing this, Xiao Cui exclaimed and ran upstairs to find Zhang Yuyao with a blushing face. At this moment, Zhang Feng stared at Li Qingxian speechlessly and said, "When will you change your pretentious style? I'll call you brother, okay? Look at you, I'm wondering if I should open a fan stall." What the hell did you do to the atmosphere of the academy? Li Qingxian shrunk his neck and hurriedly put away his fan. He chuckled and entered Zhang Feng's villa. Minding his own business, he drank the cup of hot tea that the old village chief didn't drink just now and said, "Today, there are many high officials and noble people, as well as those beautiful young ladies from the capital, coming. I heard that they all know that although you have 3 daughters, you are unmarried, so they all want to see your peerless beauty. How about we go together?" Zhang Feng was a little confused. He pointed at his own nose and said, "Me? Just me?" However, the next moment, Zhang Feng looked around and asked, "Are you sure?" Li Qingxian rolled his eyes and chuckled. He didn't say anything. Tai Niu and the others are ready. Ma Zhou, Hao Chujun, and the others are also ready. They are practicing the dance under De Bing's guidance. They are ready to shine today. Zhang Feng took the fan from Li Qingxian's belt and knocked on Li Qingxian's head. He said, "Instead of studying, you think about those useless things all day long? Although the girls are beautiful, what does that have to do with you? Today, this dean will naturally go, but you are leaving tomorrow. Don't you have to get along well with your brothers?" This, Li Qingxian was instantly stunned. But under the signal of Zhang Feng's eyes, he suddenly turned his head and found that Jing Shu had quietly stood behind him with 2 bowls of steaming hot food in her hands. Li Qingxian was so scared that he hurriedly got up and maintained his poise. He straightened his body and said, "Greetings, mistress." Jing Shu's expressionless face instantly turned red. She looked at Zhang Feng with some panic. Seeing this, Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, "That's enough. Go back and pack up. When I come back tonight, I will give you a set of clothes to ensure your safety in Qiuzi." While they were talking, Zhang Feng got up and pushed Li Qingxian out of the room. When they were leaving, Zhang Feng glared at Li Qingxian and said with a face full of warning, "How dare you speak nonsense to Lao Tzu? Do you believe that Lao Tzu won't give you anything when you leave this time?" Chapter 16:12. Young master, are you going to the phosphate fertilizer factory? At this moment, Jing Shu asked indifferently and coldly. He actually started to eat and drink the steaming hot nutritious porridge without a care in the world. Zhang Feng's face stiffened. He coughed and said, "It's not a phosphate fertilizer factory. It's a big... I also heard that many daughters of rich families and all the young ladies in the city will go there to have a look." This time, Zhang Feng was speechless. He hurriedly said, "Well, who am I, Zhang Feng? I'm a gentleman. How can I do such a vulgar thing? Besides, today is also a big event for us. It's not good if we don't show up today." And Zhang Feng explained a lot, but what he got was Jing Shu's gentle smile. "This is your business. If you want to take a concubine, I have to congratulate you." Zhang Feng choked on the words in his stomach. Looking at Jing Shu's elegant back as she walked up the stairs, she suddenly felt a sense of loneliness. This feeling was exactly the same as when he was in a sea of people, but he still felt lonely. Zhang Feng couldn't help but feel a lump in his throat. He stood up alone and hugged Jing Shu. "Shu, you have to believe me. How can I, Zhang Feng, be able to be favored by you and the 3 of you? This is the fortune of 3 lifetimes. Then don't you want to explain who the woman in the courtyard is?" In an instant. Only then did Zhang Feng remember what old Yu had said yesterday. It seemed that the Zhang family's side relative in Phoenix Ridge, who was also his cousin, came to find him. At first, he thought that old Yu was using this as an excuse. But now he knew when he saw Jingshu. He instantly felt that things might not be so simple. He hurriedly asked, "How did you know?" Jingshu was carried into the bedroom by Zhang Feng. Then he held Jingshu's shoulders and held her cheeks. No wonder Jingshu didn't let him touch her last night. Zhang Yuyao also ignored him. At this time, Zhang Feng finally understood the whole story. Jingshu struggled for a while and begged for mercy while panting. Then she looked into Zhang Feng's eyes. In an instant, a layer of mist appeared in her eyes and she said, "Yesterday, someone from my family came and said that a Miss Zhang came with your marriage certificate and said that she wanted to fulfill the marriage contract with you. Now, almost everyone knows about this." Buzz. Zhang Feng's head instantly exploded. Damn it. What did this mean? I just randomly made up an address, and I was accidentally given an identity. I'm very lucky that the whole family died in the mountain flood. But at this time, where the hell did this marriage contract come from? Zhang Feng was going crazy. He saw that there were 2 lines of tears in Jingshu's eyes. Zhang Feng's heart melted. He hurriedly wiped Jingshu's tears and said, "Okay, don't cry. Let's not cry, okay? I swear to God that I don't know anything about this marriage. If I remember a little, I will tell you clearly." "Oh right." Zhang Feng patted his forehead and pointed to the door. He said, "This may be the idea of those people. Do you remember the Qian Wanli incident? And the incident in the underground palace of Chang, and last time? Both times, it was your husband who exposed their schemes. Mother f***, this group of people is really capable. They actually want to play such a vicious trick on us from the inside?" The more Zhang Feng thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. At this time, the more he spoke, the angrier he became. Jingshu looked at him with a puzzled face. She asked in disbelief, "You really don't know about this?" Zhang Feng repeatedly waved his hand and said, "I swear to God, if I know about this, I, Zhang Feng, will meet God." Without waiting for him to finish, Jingshu's cold little hands blocked his mouth. She hurriedly pressed Zhang Feng into her arms and said, "I believe you, I believe you." "Young master, don't say any more." Zhang Feng was not going to accept it. There must be something fishy about this matter. Otherwise, damn it, how could there be such a coincidence? Today was the phosphate fertilizer factory banquet, and yesterday this thing happened? It was obvious that they were here to ruin his reputation. Truly, if this could be tolerated, what could be tolerated? "Shu, or, you don't have to care about this matter anymore. If I don't get to the bottom of this matter, I, Zhang Feng, will write my name upside down." While speaking, Zhang Feng could not help but look up to the sky and sigh. Really, the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. Quick! Damn it, copy it. This is the Dean's golden words. My God! It's really wonderful. The tallest tree in the forest, the wind will destroy it, beautiful. It's really too beautiful. Just after Zhang Feng finished sighing, Zhang Feng faintly heard a burst of whispers downstairs. Zhang Feng could not help but be dumbfounded. He was stunned for a while before he reacted. When he reacted and opened the door to take a look downstairs, he was instantly furious. He saw that downstairs were densely packed with groups of students. At this time, they were savoring the words that Zhang Feng had just said, and also crazily copying at the same time. Zhang Feng was so angry. He even had the intention to kill someone. He shouted angrily downstairs, "All of you, get the hell out of Lao Tzu's way. Sun Dishing. Remember Lao Tzu, every one of you here will be soaking in the lake for Lao Tzu tonight. Lao Tzu let you peek, let you get excited,